A whistling wind blows through the quiet night air outside a lonely window.
The blonde woman, Adilis Brill, packs her belongings in a frantic rush to escape the Emperor.
A terrifying vision of a blood-stained dress warns her of a destined, violent death. Trembling with fear, she desperately vows to change her fate and survive the coming day.
She tightly grips a patterned handkerchief, reinforcing her resolve to live through the night.
Her attention turns to the blue fabric, sparking a memory of a distant, forgotten promise. She recalls a man holding her hand and the cloth while promising to return to her.
The memory of a man in a simple tan tunic remains her only source of comfort. Adilis waits for her guard knight, hoping he will arrive to save her from danger.
She remembers the orange-haired knight kneeling before her to pledge his eternal protection. Believing he has forgotten his oath after all this time, she prepares to leave alone. A sudden, sharp knock sounds at the door, catching her completely off guard. Her green eyes widen in shock as she stares toward the unexpected visitor.
A red-haired man stands in the doorway, apologizing for his long delay in reaching her.
Rayhan smiles at Lady Adilis, finally appearing to honor his long-standing commitment.
Overwhelmed with relief, she beams as she realizes her protector has finally arrived.
She rejoices that Rayhan has truly returned to keep his word and save her. Her thoughts drift back to the day she discovered a glowing book in the library. She wonders about the origins of the mysterious red book titled Destiny of the Flower. A magical vision within the book addresses her as the Empire's future empress. The book shows a horrifying scene of the red-haired emperor standing over her with a sword. In the vision, she lies bleeding as the emperor mocks her crimes and her title. The emperor announces his intention to crown a new empress over her lifeless body.
A heavy thud sounds as Adilis drops the book in a state of pure terror.
She panics, questioning why her own name is featured in such a gruesome prophecy.
The realization that she was the woman stabbed in the vision leaves her breathless.
Collapsed on the floor, she curses the creator of the book that shows her death. She wonders if the book contains dark magic specifically designed to predict her demise.
The sheer realism of the prophetic vision makes it impossible for her to ignore.
Her maid Anne rushes into the room, startled to find her mistress on the floor.
Anne expresses deep concern for her lady's pale and sickly appearance.
Desperate for answers, Adilis urges Anne to look at the strange book immediately. She asks her maid if she has ever encountered such creepy or unsettling magic. Anne looks on with total confusion, unable to see what her mistress is describing. The maid explains that the book appears to be nothing but blank paper. Stunned into silence, Adilis realizes that only she can see the book's contents. Days of careful study reveal several unusual and disturbing facts about the volume. She confirms that the book remains invisible to others, who see only empty pages. No record of the book's purchase exists, suggesting it manifested on the shelf magically. Adilis remains highly suspicious of the book's unknown origin and its dark messages. She notes that the book occasionally emits a strange, pulsating light. Each time the volume glows, new and disturbing details are added to the story. Others remain oblivious to the blinding light that Adilis finds impossible to miss. A character profile identifies Adilis Brill as the daughter destined to become empress. She discovers a list of characters, though some important details remain hidden from view. The book continues to deliver its message through a combination of text and visions. The prophecy claims she will become a jealous villain and die by the Emperor's sword. She angrily rejects the idea of being forced into a marriage that ends in murder. Rationality tells her not to believe the book blindly, but the fear remains. Despite her doubts, the disturbing nature of the visions prevents her from finding peace. Adilis Brill clutches her head in frustration while studying the book's mysterious text. Her eyes widen in alarm as the book suddenly emits a brilliant, blinding glow. A vision of a person in a decorated military uniform flickers within the pages. Startled by the sudden update, Adilis realizes the book is revealing a new character. She reads that Rayhan is a kidnapped child living as a gladiator without his past. Although his portrait is obscured, the text describes him as having red hair and golden eyes. She calls out to her maid, Anne, and tells her they are going out immediately.
A steady clack-clack sounds as she walks, determined to see if this person truly exists.
Donning a dark cloak, she decides her first mission is to find the gladiator, Rayhan. A grand carriage drawn by 4 horses travels through a desolate, barren forest landscape. A sharp click sounds as someone opens the door and announces they have finally arrived.
Anne expresses concern, asking why her mistress would visit such a cruel, dangerous place.
Adilis remains resolute, hoping that finding Rayhan will prove the book's prophecies are real. A guide welcomes the noble lady and offers to show her around the arena.
She asks the man if there is a gladiator there with red hair and golden eyes.
A creak sounds as the guide tells her she is in luck because his match is starting. A roaring wah erupts as the announcer introduces the match between Jack and Rayhan.
Watching from the balcony, Adelis wonders if the fighter in the arena is her target. A red cloak flutters dramatically as the fighters prepare for their violent confrontation.
A loud clang sounds as the fighters attack fiercely while the guide offers her a seat.
She cautions herself not to jump to conclusions, as it might just be a namesake.
Another sharp clang rings out as the helmeted fighter in the red cloak struggles.
A single glowing golden eye peers intensely through the narrow slit of the fighter's helmet.
A thud sounds as Adelis watches the match with her heart racing in her chest.
A sickening slash sounds as the red-cloaked champion is brutally struck by his opponent.
Adelis gasps in horror, realizing that the match has taken a very dark turn.
The red-haired fighter collapses to the sandy floor in a pool of blood. A triumphant voice declares that the victory belongs to them as the duel ends. The crowd erupts in deafening cheers as the victor stands over the fallen gladiator. Overwhelmed by the noise and the violence, Adelis hangs her head in somber silence. The arena echoes with the crowd chanting the fallen fighter's name, Rayhan, over and over. The guide asks if she is leaving, noting that the next match might be more fun. Adelis ignores his suggestion and firmly demands to be taken to the manager right now. A rhythmic clack-clack sounds as the group descends the stone stairs toward the lower levels. A heavy thud sounds as the scarred manager welcomes the noble lady to his office. She asks to examine Rayhan closely, and the manager orders his men to bring him. A long creak sounds as Adelis waits, praying the boy is just someone with the same name. A dull thud sounds as a boy's limp leg is dragged across the stone floor. The guide drops the injured boy before Adelis, who gasps in shock at his condition. She is horrified by his untreated wounds and shocked that a small child is a gladiator. A quick snap sounds as the manager dismisses her concern and orders the boy to wake.
A sudden splash sounds as a bucket of water is thrown over the unconscious child.
Water splashes across the room, drenching the injured boy to rouse him from the sleep.
A ragged cough sounds as the boy wakes up, his red hair dripping with water.
She furiously demands to know what kind of treatment involves pouring water on an injured child. She rushes toward the boy, asking if he is okay and offering to dry him off. A sudden gasp sounds as Adelis gets a clear look at the boy's face. The boy slowly rouses himself, his features partially hidden by his wet, matted red hair. He stares back at her with striking golden eyes that glow with a faint intensity. She confirms that his gleaming eyes and red hair match the book's description perfectly. Adelis confirms the book's truth, fearing her fate is to die by the Emperor.
A sharp snap sounds as the manager orders his men to take Rayhan away.
Rayhan grunts as he is dragged, and Adelis demands they stop the rough treatment.
The manager tells her that mercy is a luxury for a slave like the boy. Clenching her fist, she resolves to keep Rayhan alive as an important story character.
Adelis announces she is taking the child, surprising the manager, who asks for clarification.
A heavy thud sounds as she drops a gold pouch to pay whatever price necessary.
She tells the manager to bid however much he wants for the boy's freedom.
A rhythmic dak-gak sounds as the carriage carries Adelis and the boy through the night. She watches Rayhan sleep, feeling immense relief that she successfully rescued him from danger. She hopes the boy might change her fate while he weakly calls out to her. Rayhan's golden eyes glow intensely as he asks her who he needs to kill.
Sitting in the carriage, Rayhan asks which person his new mistress wants him to kill.
Adelis is horrified, asking why he thinks she wants him to commit a murder. Rayhan asks if he is for assassinations, and she tells him not to be scary. He asks why she took him, but she hides her knowledge of the book's destiny. She claims she needs a bodyguard, though he notes that gladiators aren't usually hired. She worries he'd think she was crazy if she told him the actual truth. He says he understands, mentioning that gladiators are often used as toys for relief. He mentions stress relief toys, and Adelis screams that she would never do that. Rayhan wonders what her plan is, and she realizes she doesn't know what to say.
The red-haired boy asks what she wants, staring at her with wide golden eyes.
Standing among flowers, she declares that she will just insist on her own logic. Rayhan agrees to follow, and she cheerfully suggests getting his wounds treated first. A clock sounds as they reach home, and she promises him new clothes and hair. The scene shifts to the grand sunlit exterior of the noble Brill family estate. A soft sagak sounds as the boy's long, matted red hair is finally trimmed.
The servant announces he is done, and Adelis gasps at the boy's clean appearance.
Dressed in a clean vest and tie, Rayhan softly thanks her for his transformation. Rayhan explains he receives daily medical treatment and lives with the lady. He notes the servants eventually accepted him because of how much Adelis cared. She keeps him constantly by her side, holding his hand as they walk the halls. Adelis asks about his favorite foods and places he might want to visit. Rayhan watches her eat and smile, moved by the genuine kindness she shows him. He wonders why she is being so good to a person she barely knows. He wonders if she truly just likes his appearance as he looks at himself. A quick dalgarak sounds as Adelis notices he is dazed and asks what is wrong.
Rayhan asks her to honestly explain why she brought him to her home.
He points out that he is a gladiator and has taken human lives.
He asks her to speak the truth without worrying about how he might react.
Adelis agrees to tell him the truth and admits there was a reason. Petting his hair, she says she couldn't leave him to suffer in the arena. She tells him she would have rescued him much earlier if she had known.
Adelis smiles warmly and promises to teach him everything he needs to know from now on.
She says good memories can help someone overcome both the past and the future.
Rihan wonders if that is the only reason or if something else is hidden. The story skips ahead a few days, showing the mansion at sunset.
A sharp toque sounds as a heavy object is placed down on the table.
A pair of hands presents a large, bulging pouch filled with gold coins.
Rayhan is given a pouch of money for his living expenses by the Count.
The Count slams his desk as a heavy, resounding gong sounds, his face contorted in shock and anger.
The red-haired boy stands with his back turned as the Count orders him to take the money and leave immediately.
The Count insists Rihan must leave since his medical treatment is complete, but Rihan pauses and wonders where the deception began as he acknowledges the command.
Adelis recalls a moment of naive realization as she smiles warmly while holding someone's hands. Looking down at the pouch in his hands, Rayhan reflects on the fact that the lady was the one who brought him here.
Adelis suddenly bursts into the room and calls out for her father, startling both the Count and Rihan. Surrounded by a symbolic aura of fury, Adelis demands a full explanation for what is happening as the Count stammers in confusion. The Count explains that the boy is fine because the physician said his wounds are healed, but Adelis questions if that is a valid reason to dismiss him without a word. The Count argues that gladiators are dangerous killers, but Adelis retorts that Rayhan is different, prompting her father to ask for proof of his uniqueness. Adelis insists Rayhan is protective and obedient, yet she privately worries if she is the only one who wants him to stay at the mansion. Rayhan interrupts the argument and asks for permission to speak directly to the Count. A soft, dull thok sounds as Rayhan places the gold on the desk, explaining he would likely be dead if the lady hadn't rescued him from the arena. Looking determined, the red-haired boy notes that his life was already destined to end prematurely. Adelis watches in silence as Rayhan expresses his desire to spend his life serving her instead. Adelis realizes she must eventually be honest about the fact that her motivations were driven by a mysterious book. Adelis begs her father to reconsider, offering to have another knight accompany them as long as the three of them can stay together. The Count sighs, acknowledging that a child's love for their parent is a powerful force, and agrees to arrange for a knight to join them. Adelis claps her hands in delight at the news, while Rayhan looks on with a bewildered expression.
As they walk through the hallway, Adelis turns to Rayhan and sincerely asks for his forgiveness.
Rayhan reassures her that he understands her father's reaction, as it is the typical way people perceive gladiators.
Their hands meet in a firm, meaningful clasp against a glowing background.
Adelis holds his hand and promises that, despite her initially selfish reasons, she will treat him with even more kindness from now on.
In a playful moment, Rayhan says she has already done enough, but Adelis insists there is much more she can do for his sake. Rayhan smiles softly and begins to say that she really is a remarkable person. A sudden, quick sook sounds as Adelis turns her head, noticing a change in Rayhan's demeanor. Rayhan drops to one knee and pledges to devote everything to protecting the lady for as long as she will have him. Looking up at her with intense golden eyes, the boy adds that his loyalty remains as long as he is not cast away. A joyful puhat sounds as Adelis laughs and calls him a fool, promising that she would never abandon him. The red-haired boy remains kneeling before the blonde lady in a grand sunlit hall. A sudden, brilliant payak sounds as the book begins to glow, catching Adelis off guard as she reflects on her past lack of suspicion. Adelis looks at the book from behind and realizes how naive her previous thoughts about the future truly were. Adelis holds the book and notes with surprise that it hasn't glowed once since she first found it. She wonders if the future has changed for the better because she brought Rayhan into her life.
Adelis lets out a confused sound as she gazes into the book, her eye widening in terror at a new vision.
A terrifying vision commands to wipe them all out, leaving Adelis paralyzed with shock as the book's pages reveal a dark message. A vision of the Count's mansion engulfed in flames appears, leading Adelis to realize her home is destined to burn down. A pained, desperate cry sounds as someone in the vision begs to be saved while choking, leaving Adelis in a state of horror. The vision shows the lifeless bodies of the butler, the cook, and even her maid Anne sprawled on the stone floor. A loud, sudden quang sounds as soldiers storm the room, announcing that the Emperor has ordered them to leave no one alive. A heavy, resounding clang sounds as the vision shifts, and Adelis frantically asks why the Count's family is being treated as traitors. Lost in thought, Adelis finds it impossible to believe that her father would ever commit treason. A pained gag sounds followed by a heavy, limp tulsak sounds as her father collapses, coughing up blood in front of her. A rhythmic, heavy jobok sounds as a pair of boots approaches, and a cold voice tells them they could have lived if they had stayed quiet.
The dark-haired emperor stares down with a chilling gaze, mocking the count for becoming senile.
Clenching his teeth, the bloodied count retorts that he has a question of his own for the man standing over him.
With blood streaming from his eyes, the count yells that there is no meaning for a father to live after losing his only daughter.
A soft trickling tereru sounds as Adelis weeps within the vision, finally understanding the weight of the book's prophecy. Adelis observes the silhouette of the emperor and realizes she is destined to die by his hands. Standing over her dying father, she understands that he only committed treason to seek revenge for her death.
A sudden, sharp whick sounds as the emperor turns away and heartlessly orders his men to dig up the grave of Adelis's mother while her father begs for mercy.
Walking away from the carnage, the dark-haired emperor heartlessly declares that the bodies of the count and his wife will be discarded in the fields.
A terrified scream echoes through the darkness as the horrifying vision of the future finally comes to an end.
Adela sits trembling on the library floor, struggling to process the grim fate revealed by the mysterious book. Weeping bitterly, she clutches her chest and blames herself for the tragic destiny awaiting her father.
A soft sob sounds as she remains huddled on the floor, consumed by an overwhelming sense of dread. Her grief is interrupted by a concerned voice asking if she is all right.
Rayhan kneels before the blonde girl, gently using a cloth to wipe away the tears streaming down her face.
Looking at her with worry, the red-haired boy asks what has troubled her so deeply.
Adelis reflects on the vision of the emperor piercing her heart and her father leading a desperate, doomed rebellion. She vividly recalls the pained expression of her father as their beloved mansion was engulfed in flames.
Her tear-filled green eyes reflect the heavy burden of knowing a future that no one else can see.
She realizes with despair that the book's contents remain invisible to everyone else, including her father.
A flashback reveals the count's confusion as he looked at the book and saw only blank, empty pages.
Trying to force a smile, she desperately attempts to convince herself that the entire prophecy is nothing but a lie. She looks back at the book lying on the floor, wondering if Rayhan's unique nature might change things. She considers that since Rayhan is a central figure in the book's story, he might be able to perceive the text.
Turning to him with desperate hope, she asks the boy if he can see what is inside the book. Rayhan reaches for the book as she silently pleads for him to confirm its terrifying reality.
A sharp pain strikes her heart as Rayhan examines the pages and confirms he sees no content inside. A soft sob sounds as the red-haired boy asks what is wrong, noticing his mistress sinking further into despair.
Upon hearing his answer, the blonde girl breaks down completely as tears stream down her face once more.
A wave of isolation washes over her as she realizes she must carry this painful truth entirely alone.
A sob sounds while Rayhan watches her weep, feeling helpless as he holds the book that remains a mystery to him.
The scene shifts to the study where the count asks the red-haired boy if he is requesting combat training.
Rayhan stands tall and expresses his firm desire to become stronger so he can properly protect his mistress.
A soft scritch sounds as the count signs a document, granting the boy permission to train with the estate's knights.
The count warns him of the difficulty ahead but promises to appoint him as her official escort if he perseveres.
A sharp clack sounds as Rayhan begins his rigorous training, striking a wooden dummy with focused intensity.
The knights watch in disbelief as the boy displays monstrous talent, defeating a young knight in just 2 weeks.
They discuss how the lady's current escort, Henry, may soon find himself replaced by the remarkably skilled boy.
A rhythmic thud sounds as Rayhan approaches the knights to ask a question that has been weighing on him.
The knights are startled when the boy asks why the countess is never seen anywhere within the mansion.
One of the knights warns him to stop asking such dangerous and sensitive questions if he wants to avoid regret.
Rayhan is stunned to learn the truth. The former countess passed away immediately after giving birth to the lady.
The knight explains that without a mother or a chaperone, the lady grew up in complete isolation.
A vision shows the young lady standing alone in a field of flowers, having lived her entire life without friends. The knight notes that Rayhan is likely her first true companion and urges him to fulfill his role faithfully.
Rayhan reflects on this realization, seeing his mistress no longer as just a lady to protect, but a lonely friend. He recalls her radiant, flower-crowned smile and understands the depth of the loneliness she has hidden. A firm squeeze sounds as Rayhan clenches his fist, overcome with a sudden, urgent need to see her. He politely asks his superior for permission to step away from the training grounds for a short moment. The knight correctly guesses from the boy's intense expression that he is rushing off to check on the lady.
Standing before her door with a determined look, Rayhan prepares to face his mistress once more. The knight calls out a final warning that being late will result in grueling penalty laps around the grounds.
A rapid patter sounds as Rayhan shouts his thanks and dashes toward her room with renewed purpose.
Opening the door, the red-haired boy calls out to her, hoping to find her in better spirits. A sob sounds as Rehan's golden eye widens in shock upon seeing the blonde girl crying once again. Heartbroken by her state, the boy cries out to his mistress as he rushes to her side.
A soft squeeze sounds as he pulls her into a comforting embrace, gently telling her not to cry.
Holding her close while she weeps, Rehan solemnly vows that he will protect her no matter what happens. Rehan acknowledges his mistress's command with a respectful, focused gaze.
The red-haired boy asks how she is feeling as Adilis expresses her gratitude and regret for her earlier outburst.
A soft, focused gaze from the blonde girl confirms that she is feeling better now.
Looking out toward the library window, the young lady realizes she must begin planning for their uncertain future.
Turning back to Rehan, the blonde lady prepares to reveal something of great importance to the boy.
The story pauses briefly as a transition sequence signals the beginning of a new chapter in their journey.
Rehan is visibly stunned when the blonde girl suddenly announces her intention to run away.
Noticing his alarm, Adilis quickly corrects herself and claims she was actually talking about a friend's plan.
Rehan recalls the knight's words about the lady growing up in isolation without any companions to call her own.
The boy looks at her with silent realization, knowing she couldn't possibly have a friend to speak of.
The blonde girl tells herself that tears won't change her reality and that survival is now her only priority.
Adilis studies a portrait and realizes the future emperor she saw in her vision is the current crown prince. She envisions herself in a cloak, determined to avoid all contact with the prince to change her tragic fate.
The lady believes that simply avoiding a meeting with the crown prince could be the key to saving her life.
A sudden realization strikes the girl, leaving her wide-eyed with shock as a new thought occurs to her.
She wonders how Rehan would have ever crossed paths with the crown prince in the book's original prophecy.
A vision of the future shows Rehan in royal armor, serving as her official escort at the palace. Looking at a vision of the coronation, she realizes Rehan would have met the prince through his position.
In a vision of Plan A, Rehan kneels with a sword, pleading with the emperor to spare the empress's life.
Adilis considers that treating the boy with even greater kindness might lead him to defend her one day.
A soft sigh sounds as the lady doubts if a mere commoner's words could ever sway a heartless emperor.
Plan B forms in her mind, and she decides to flee the moment she is ever chosen as the next empress.
Shifting her focus back to the present, she continues her story about the friend she mentioned earlier.
Rehan questions how a woman could possibly live alone and support herself in the outside world without help.
The red-haired boy warns her that escaping in secret is difficult and full of dangers like ruthless bandits.
He emphasizes that personal safety should always be the most important consideration for anyone fleeing their home.
The blonde girl looks on as Rehan suggests a scenario involving an escort who isn't a trained knight.
With a humble gesture, the red-haired boy asks if someone like him could serve as her protector.
Stunned by the suggestion, the lady realizes she had never considered Rehan as a solution to her problem. Adilis begins to voice a hypothetical question about what might happen if she decided to leave the mansion.
A firm, rhythmic tuck sounds as Rehan calls out to her, catching her attention with a sudden movement.
The red-haired boy kneels before the lady, his expression filled with unwavering dedication and loyalty.
Rehan makes a solemn request for her to notify him before she goes, promising to accompany her anywhere.
The blonde lady looks at the boy and wonders if he could truly be the protector she is lacking. Warning him sternly, Adilis tells the boy not to dare change his mind about this commitment later on. She looks him in the eye and demands confirmation that he is truly coming with her when the time comes. A soft knock sounds as they link pinky fingers, and Rehan vows to protect her no matter what. The scene shifts as peaceful time passes and the cold early spring gives way to the next season. The grand estate stands under a clear sky as the season for the imperial balls unexpectedly arrives. A sudden heavy kung sounds as Adilis reacts with visible shock to the mention of a debutante ball. The count informs his daughter that she must prepare for her debut at the upcoming summer palace ball. Adilis tentatively asks her father if it would be possible for her to skip the ball entirely. A soft, anxious fidgeting sounds as the girl claims to be afraid and uncomfortable around large crowds.
A soft tuck sounds as the count reaches out toward his daughter and calls her by name.
A rhythmic jabuk sounds as the count approaches, insisting that her attendance is a matter of his peace.
Embracing his daughter, the blonde-haired man asks for this one favor to fulfill his duty as a father. A terrifying vision of her father begging for mercy flashes before Adilis' eyes, filling her with dread. Recalling the tragic prophecy from the book, the blonde girl finds it impossible to refuse her father's wish.
The scene shifts to the mansion exterior several days later as preparations for the event begin in earnest.
A soft, rhythmic saraq sounds as a maid finishes brushing the lady's long blonde hair, announcing they are done.
The maid praises Adilis' beauty, while the blonde girl worries about attracting too much attention.
A soft clack sounds as the lady takes a step in her elegant white shoes.
Adilis feels overwhelmed, knowing she cannot avoid meeting the crown prince at the palace.
She hopes that staying focused and avoiding him might keep her safe from her fate. A soft rustle sounds as she grips her dress, dreading an unavoidable encounter with him. The blonde lady stares ahead with a look of growing anxiety as her debut approaches. Rayhan waits by the ornate carriage, greeting his mistress as she prepares to depart.
Looking dashing in his escort uniform, the red-haired boy asks for the honor of escorting her.
A close-up reveals the exquisite jewel-encrusted brooch adorning the center of her dress.
Rayhan gently takes her hand, offering reassurance and telling her not to worry about the night ahead.
A rhythmic clatter sounds as the carriage arrives at the majestic and imposing imperial palace.
Count Brill leads the way while Adilis instructs Rayhan to wait for her after one dance.
Rayhan reflects on his status, wishing he weren't a commoner so he could stay by her side.
The red-haired boy watches her go, earnestly asking his lady to return to him safely.
The grand ballroom is filled with the low hum of conversation from the assembled nobility.
The emperor welcomes the empire's talents, celebrating those who have reached their 18th year.
Adilis searches the room, noticing the emperor's presence, but wondering where the crown prince is.
The emperor stands tall, overlooking the crowd with a presence that commands the entire room.
A sudden sharp gasp sounds as Adilis is paralyzed by the emperor's dark, predatory gaze. She quickly turns away, desperately hoping that their eyes didn't actually meet in that moment. A chilling smile plays across the emperor's face as he watches the young lady from afar.
He concludes his speech by wishing divine blessings upon all the guests gathered for the ball.
The soft melody of strings and woodwinds fills the air as the musicians begin to play.
Adilis exhales in relief, thankful that the crown prince is seemingly absent from the event.
A rhythmic top sounds as she walks alone while her father is busy speaking with others.
A man interrupts her thoughts by calling her name, prompting her to ask who he is.
Introducing himself as Luta of the Wise family, the man asks if she has a dance partner.
A heavy presence looms as the emperor suddenly appears and asks if she is without a partner.
With a terrifying grin, the emperor declares that he shall be her partner for the dance.
The emperor towers over the trembling girl, insisting on taking her as his companion.
Adilis awkwardly claims she already has a partner, but the emperor demands to know who.
She points to where Luta was standing, only to find that the man has completely vanished.
The emperor notes the man's disappearance and insists there is no choice but to dance with him. Despite her polite excuses about her lack of grace, the emperor firmly demands she take his hand.
Adilis dances with the emperor in distress, mentally cursing Luta for leaving her in this position.
The surrounding nobles gossip about Count Brill's daughter making her debut with the emperor himself.
A firm squeeze sounds as the emperor's hand grips her waist, making the situation feel incredibly unfortunate.
The blonde girl feels increasingly uncomfortable, wondering why the emperor is being so clingy during the dance.
A soft, ragged breath sounds as the emperor leans in close, his presence becoming suffocatingly intimate.
A dark grin spreads as the emperor whispers that he will bring her good news very soon.
A rhythmic thud sounds as the emperor finally walks away, leaving Adilis shaken and alone.
A sharp crack sounds as she clenches her fist, her body trembling with suppressed rage and fear. She mentally screams at the emperor's audacity, noting his age compared to her own father.
Count Brill returns and apologizes for the delay, unaware of the traumatic encounter his daughter just had.
A rapid patter sounds as Adilis tells her father she is tired and rushes toward the exit.
Seeing Rayhan waiting by the carriage, the blonde girl cries out his name in desperation.
Rayhan asks what happened, noting that she has been silent ever since they left the palace grounds.
A sharp exclamation sounds as the lady commands that they return home immediately.
A soft splash sounds as Rayhan pours tea back at the mansion, asking if she is all right.
Adilis sits huddled in her chair, unable to speak as Rayhan asks what she experienced inside. Adilis sits alone, trembling as she recalls the traumatic experience of having the emperor as her first dance partner.
Rayhan's expression darkens as the lady recounts how the emperor inappropriately touched her during the ball. The blonde girl is brought to tears by the memory of being treated so disrespectfully at the palace.
A poignant thought reflects on how positive new experiences can help overshadow the pain of bitter memories.
Rayhan kneels before her, expressing his resolve to cherish life just as he was once taught.
Adilis recalls a childhood memory of patting Rayhan's red hair while promising to teach him the value of life.
The red-haired boy speaks gently, asking his lady if she would consider a small request.
With a hopeful look, Rayhan asks for the honor of sharing just one dance with her.
A close-up of the boy's golden eyes shows his deep longing for a moment of connection with her.
Surprised but moved, Adilis admits she cannot refuse such a wonderful man when he asks on one knee.
The pair prepares to dance, finding comfort in each other's presence within the quiet room.
They begin to move gracefully together, the air seemingly filled with the light melody of their shared moment.
Rayhan confesses that he spent his time practicing his dance steps in solitude specifically for her.
The boy remembers watching her lessons from a distance and then tirelessly mimicking the steps by himself. The blonde lady is genuinely impressed that he could master such a difficult dance from a mere glimpse.
A slight mistake occurs in their steps, causing a brief pause in their rhythmic movement.
Rayhan becomes flustered and apologizes profusely, admitting he is still not fully accustomed to the dance. A bright ah-ha-ha sounds as Adelis laughs, encouraging him by saying he is dancing remarkably well for his first time. Adelis beams with joy, feeling that their dance is perfect even without the accompaniment of palace musicians.
Rayhan looks at her fondly, cherishing this intimate moment where it feels like they are the only two people in the world.
The scene captures the two of them spinning together, momentarily forgetting the troubles of the outside world. A rhythmic tea-talk sounds as a sudden knock on the door interrupts their peaceful dance.
Startled by the sound, the pair stops their dance and looks toward the source of the interruption.
A soft creak sounds as Count Brill enters, looking incredibly grave and summoning Adelis to the reception room.
Adelis worries as she notices her father looks even more pale and distressed than when she last saw him.
An official decree is read aloud, announcing that Adelis has been chosen as a candidate for the Emperor's consort. A sudden kung sounds as Adelis reacts with horror to the news that she is to be a consort instead of an empress. Her green eyes fill with fear as she realizes something has fundamentally changed in the course of her fate. The girl is deeply confused because the original book she read stated she would always become the empress.
She struggles to understand why she would be assigned to the old emperor instead of the crown prince as expected.
A soft tuck sounds as the Count places a comforting hand on his daughter's shoulder.
A sharp kaduk sounds as the blonde man grits his teeth, promising her that he will find a way to resolve this. Adelis continues to tremble, her mind racing for a solution as she repeats her father's words.
The lady decides her first course of action must be to consult the prophetic book for any hidden details.
A rapid parallax sounds as she frantically searches through the pages for any mention of an imperial consort.
The ornate pages are scanned quickly as she tries to reconcile the text with her new reality.
Her dread grows when she finds no mention of a consort position, only her inevitable rise as the empress.
She begins to doubt the truth of the book itself, wondering how Rayhan's real-world existence fits into the story. Rayhan enters the library, his face reflecting the shock of the news he heard from the Count. A rhythmic geobox sounds as the boy approaches, while Adelis grabs his sleeve with a soft cock sound. Crying out in distress, the blonde girl explains that she cannot understand why she must face this new fate. She desperately wonders if there is any method to force the Emperor to refuse the marriage himself.
A dark idea takes hold as a voice suggests that a marred appearance would make the Emperor reject her.
Adelis holds a dagger with a shaking hand, her eyes filled with tears as she considers a desperate sacrifice. The chilling thought of scarring her own face to escape the marriage fills the silent room.
She realizes that her fear of the physical pain would likely cause her to hesitate and fail the task.
Facing Rayhan, the lady begs the red-haired boy to be the one to inflict the scar for her.
She continues her desperate plea, asking him to help her escape this future through this extreme act. Rayhan shouts his refusal, but Adelis argues that a deep, swift cut is the only way to ensure the plan works.
A sharp quang sounds as Rayhan grips her arm firmly, declaring that there must be another way to save her.
Confusion fills Adelis's green eyes as she questions the situation before her. A soft rustle sounds as Rayhan kneels, asking if she would accept a dishonorable method. Adelis agrees, preferring a scandal over treason, and tells him to visit her that night. A heavy silence falls over the mansion as night settles across the grounds.
A rhythmic, polite knock sounds as a hand strikes the door in the quiet mid. Adelis welcomes Rayhan, showing him a packed trunk and suggesting they run away together immediately.
While she lists her packed clothes, Rayhan clarifies that running away isn't part of the plan. A sharp metal sound echoes as Rayhan draws his dagger and asks her to reconsider. Rayhan asks if she is truly fine with the dishonorable path they are about to take.
Adelis confirms her resolve to survive, and Rayhan approaches with his dagger as she swallows hard.
A sudden, sickening splash sounds as Adelis gasps in horror at the sight of blood.
Adelis panics as blood drips from Rayhan's hand, while he calmly tells her it's okay.
Rayhan instructs his lady to lie perfectly still in bed until others arrive in the morning. The full extent of the scandalous plan dawns on her as she stares in shock. A profound realization hits her that such a desperate and unexpected method actually existed. The blonde girl sits in her nightclothes, visibly shaken by the sudden turn of events.
Rayhan is startled as Adelis clarifies the intent behind faking a scandal involving her virtue.
Edelise explains she is not naive, having already experienced the tragedy of her own past death.
Adelis invites Rayhan onto the bed to complete the scene, leaving him completely flustered.
She teases him, noting that she is the one in the truly embarrassing position.
A soft sigh sounds as Adelis wonders aloud if this fake scandal will lead to marriage.
Rayhan freezes in shock at the idea of a noblewoman marrying a commoner like him.
Adelis laughs off his concern, suggesting they enter a fake marriage once they have escaped.
She explains that a fake marriage is a practical way for them to live without suspicion.
Rayhan pauses, his expression darkening as he prepares to voice a thought he has been harboring.
In the quiet room, Rayhan admits that he is thinking of leaving the mansion and her.
Adelis reacts with panic, desperately hoping he is joking, but his serious face says otherwise.
A rhythmic footstep sounds as Rayhan explains he must disappear to take the blame for the scandal.
She realizes his sacrificial intent as he tells her to let the scandalous rumors stand.
Her heart sinks as she realizes that his departure is a cold, hard reality.
A sudden, swift movement sounds as she rushes toward him, calling his name in desperation. She begs him for forgiveness, wondering if her talk of marriage was what drove him away.
A tight squeeze sounds as she offers him a title and wealth to make him stay.
A soft, firm grip sounds as she holds onto his hand with all her strength.
The red-haired boy offers a faint, melancholic smile as he looks down at her.
Rayhan gently tells his lady to go on living her life as she always has.
Tears stream down her face as she asks how she can possibly live without him.
She realizes that story roles are meaningless compared to the person she has come to love.
She continues to weep, questioning his broken promise and the secrets he refuses to share.
She accepts her inability to stop him as he apologizes and promises a future return. She searches for hope in his words, and he solemnly vows to return to her.
She makes him promise that if she is in danger in the future, he will save her.
She commands him to fulfill his promise, her green eyes locked with his golden ones.
The red-haired boy stares back with a fierce and unwavering determination in his golden gaze. Rayhan fixes his clothes and pledges to protect her at any cost when the time comes.
A soft, tender touch sounds as he cups her cheek one last time. A soft, gentle kiss sounds as he presses his lips to her forehead in a final farewell.
They share a final, intimate moment of closeness before their inevitable and painful separation.
Adelis stands in the empty room, looking out the window and whispering his name.
Disqualified by scandal, she is exiled to her territory while search parties fail to find Rayhan.
She wonders where he is, guessing he hasn't traveled very far away.
A dialogue bubble notes that today is just another cycle of the same lonely routine.
The lady continues to search the book while waiting endlessly for Rayhan's return.
Adela stands by the window with a book, her expression filled with quiet, enduring patience. 7 long years pass by before an unexpected event finally disrupts her quiet life. Now 25, Adelis is shocked to learn her father has been promoted to a marquise.
Count Brill smiles while holding his tea, asking if this elevation is wonderful news for them.
A red-haired man in a military cape orders a knight to exhume the former countess's grave.
A hand holds an official letter sealed with a thick, formal stamp of red wax.
The narrator reveals that a formal marriage proposal has been sent specifically for the lady.
Her father explains the emperor has decided to make Adelis his new empress.
Horror washes over Adelis as she realizes the current young emperor is the one asking.
A year ago, a bloody coup destroyed the corrupt imperial family in a swift takeover.
Adelis walks away, relieved her scandal kept her out of the marriage market until now.
A loud "what?" echoes as she stands and firmly refuses the imperial proposal. A rhythmic ta-dot-dot sounds as she runs, panicking over the young emperor's sudden proposal.
She gasps as she realizes these events are now mirroring the prophetic book perfectly.
The lady vows to survive at any cost, refusing to die as the story dictates.
A mysterious man with a gentle smile appears, only his lower face visible.
A dialogue bubble announces that he has come back to finally fulfill a long-standing promise.
Rayhan stands before her in a dark cape, glad to finally see his lady again.
The red-haired man looks at her with warmth and a soft, deeply knowing smile.
Adelis clutches his hands in disbelief, asking if it is truly her long-lost companion.
Overwhelmed with joy, she exclaims that she has so many questions after his long absence.
Rayhan asks why she never sent him even a single letter during their long separation.
Adelis kneels before him, asking if he remembers the promise he made before leaving her.
A memory of his vow to devote his entire self to her protection surfaces. In a vision of the past, a younger Rayhan kneels to pledge his life to her. He looks at her tenderly, admitting he hasn't forgotten her for even a single moment. Rayhan's expression turns somber as he wonders if he is still allowed to keep that vow. A sudden war axe sounds as Adelis throws herself into his arms, answering him with a firm yes.
A rhythmic tuck sounds as the red-haired man reacts with surprise to her sudden hug.
A soft cog sounds as they hold each other tight in the moonlight by the window.
Startled by the intensity, she pulls back slightly and questions why he is finally here. The blonde lady looks at him with concern, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. Adelis frantically explains the marriage proposal, insisting she will never marry the emperor.
A soft murmur sounds as Rayhan asks if she truly dislikes marrying the emperor that much.
A soft clog sounds as she declares her desire is to be with him instead. Rayhan is visibly taken aback by her blunt confession of wanting to be by his side.
She insists she can live as a commoner, using her saved jewels to survive without greed.
A soft suck sounds as Rayhan cups her face, telling her to be very greedy instead.
A soft tick sounds as they lean together, Rayhan promising to do everything for her. A sudden whag sounds as she turns away, flustered by her decision to leave her status.
Adelis blushes deeply as he tells her to wait for his return the following evening.
A soft talk sounds as she grabs his hand, threatening to leave alone if he's late.
A soft karaoke sounds as Rayhan nods, and she begs him to absolutely come get her.
Rayhan tells his lady not to worry, regardless of what the next day might bring.
A tight knot sounds as their hands entwine in a final, firm promise before he leaves.
A rhythmic hoodadak sounds as a voice calls for the lady from outside the mansion.
A panicked maid rushes forward, calling out for her lady as the scene shifts to morning. A maid frantically urges Adelis to prepare because the emperor has arrived unexpectedly early. A rhythmic tadak sounds as her father approaches her on the sunny balcony. Count Brill looks at his daughter with a calm, expectant smile.
A rhythmic ta-dot-dot sounds as an imperial carriage and knights gallop through the gates.
Adelis and her father walk together toward the arriving party in front of the mansion. A rhythmic ta-dot-dot sounds as she desperately wishes for Rayhan to fulfill his promise.
The lady looks around with a mix of confusion and building anticipation.
A sudden wave of joy washes over her face as she spots someone familiar. A red-haired man in a magnificent imperial uniform stands before her with a gentle gaze.
A sudden warak sounds as the emperor catches her in a warm, protective embrace.
A soft cog sounds as she hugs him back, relieved he made it in time. She is stunned as others greet the red-haired man as the new emperor. A heavy dung sounds as her father and the servants bow deeply while she stares. A sudden whick sounds as she turns to look at the man she once knew. A soft chiak sounds as Rayhan kneels to formally keep his promise to her. He smiles warmly while holding her hand, looking nothing like the boy he was. The realization that Rayhan is the young emperor from the prophecy hits her hard. Horror and disbelief cloud her features as she processes this impossible identity.
Rayhan calls her name, but she remains frozen in a stunned, heavy silence.
She struggles to reconcile her memory of a commoner with the ruler standing before her. Amidst the shocked gazes of the staff, she demands to know how he became emperor. Rayhan explains he worked tirelessly to become someone worthy of standing by her side. He admits that longing for her was what allowed him to endure the long years.
A sharp gasp escapes her as his heartfelt confession reaches her.
Rand sweeps her off her feet, admitting how much he truly missed his lady. She remains wide-eyed and speechless in his arms, still unable to comprehend the situation. The narration notes how much he has changed and grown since they last met. She finds herself distracted by how handsome and imposing his face has become.
Adelis flushes with embarrassment, frantically begging him to put her down.
Rayhan insists on carrying her while she panics about entering the carriage.
She tries to find a moment to stop him and reconsider the imperial proposal.
Rayhan's expression remains calm as he questions her desire to refuse the marriage. A cold, silent tension fills the air as he wonders about her true intentions. A sudden wheek sounds as he asks if she plans to ruin his reputation.
A panicked shout rings out as she denies anything happened between them.
He continues to hold her, teasingly asking if she plans to escape after their night.
A soft whyak sounds as she turns red, while he warns her about rumors. He jokes about the blood she shed, making the maids whisper as she laments his change.
A rhythmic ta-dot-dot sounds as the grand imperial carriage carries them away.
A soft poong sounds as a chibi Adelis glares with her arms crossed in annoyance. Inside the carriage, Rayhan apologizes for teasing her, but she isn't amused.
She worries about the scandalous reputation he is purposefully building for her.
He laughs off her frustration, finally promising to stop teasing her about the past. A soft beat passes as he reaffirms that he truly did miss her.
He looks at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated affection.
She stares back, her heart racing as she tries to accept this new reality. A dark thought enters her mind, questioning if he is destined to become her executioner.
A soft kook sounds as she grips her dress, terrified of the prophetic book's ending.
A soft diol sounds as her hands tremble while she sits opposite the powerful emperor.
Rayhan holds her close again as she asks if she can still refuse the marriage. The red-haired man in the imperial uniform softly whispers Adelis' nay.
Inside the carriage, Rand asks if she genuinely dislikes the idea of marrying him.
Adelis looks away, reflecting on how her father's new status has already shifted their destiny.
She decides to be completely transparent about her feelings regarding their current situation. Adelis bluntly confesses that she has no desire to marry the Emperor.
Rayhan smiles warmly at her, his expression filled with a gentle, knowing affection.
She demands to know why he hid his identity while he explains he sought her father's aid during the coup.
A chibi Adilis is paralyzed with shock as she processes the scale of the rebellion.
Rayhan confirms her father's critical role in his ascension, making Adelis realize the depth of her father's schemes.
She weeps at the thought of her father risking everything just to secure her future.
Rayhan explains the logistics of the proposal and admits his impatience drove him to visit her that night.
Chibi Adelis looks suspicious as she asks why the Emperor keeps smiling.
Rayhan gently reminds her of his new status, causing a sudden realization to wash over her.
Horror strikes the lady as she realizes she has been speaking informally to the supreme ruler. A flustered Adilis begs for forgiveness, but Rayhan playfully insists she should treat him as her own.
She is baffled by his request, unable to see how an emperor could be her subordinate.
A close-up shows Rayhan's hand gently grasping a long lock of her hair.
He admits that his heart has been tethered to her ever since their time together years ago. Blushing deeply, Adelis accuses him of being completely shameless in his pursuit. She insists that he must act with the dignity befitting a monarch, even when they are alone. Rayhan looks somber, noting that the world is no longer as simple as it was during their youth.
Adelis ponders the 7 years that have changed them both from children into their current roles.
A chibi Rayhan looks mournful, causing Adelis to stare at him with a mix of pity and concern.
Rayhan looks out toward the sunlight, suggesting they maintain their old bond.
Adelis is startled as she addresses him formally, her green eyes wide.
Rayhan holds her hands tightly, clarifying that his proposal is a humble request rather than a command.
With a gentle gaze, he confesses how much he truly longed for her throughout their long separation. Adelis relents, admitting she cannot refuse him when he speaks with such sincerity. A radiant glow surrounds Rayhan as he smiles brightly at her relenting. She sets a boundary, declaring she will only speak casually when no one else is watching. Rayhan is delighted, confirming that their private moments will remain as comfortable as they once were. A happy chibi Rayhan asks her to please be comfortable around him.
As the carriage rolls through the woods, Adelis wonders if she is being skillfully manipulated.
Sunlight filters through the green leaves as the carriage travels down the road.
A quick talk sounds as the carriage bounces, prompting Adelis to call out to Rayhan. She complains that he is sitting far too close to her, but he answers with devious charm. Rayhan explains that sitting across from her would prevent him from holding her hand. Adelis shuts her eyes in embarrassment, once again lamenting his lack of shame. He leans in, listing the many things he wishes to experience with her now that they are reunited. A close-up shows Rayhan's sleeve as he mentions having a wedding ceremony. Their hands interlace as he lists simple things like eating meals together. He leans in close, teasingly asking if she knows what follows their wedding night.
Adelis panics at the suggestion, while Rayhan laughs and promises she will find out soon enough.
She stares at him, wondering if this playful man is truly the same boy she once knew.
Rayhan's joke about their future intimacy leaves her frantically denying that anything has happened yet.
She insists that such things are for the distant future, but Rayhan remains undeterred.
A sharp keek sounds as Rayhan's expression suddenly turns cold and alert.
He signals for silence as the carriage stops abruptly, far before they have reached their destination.
A violent quadric sounds as a blade shatters the window, spraying shards everywhere. Rayhan throws himself over Adelis to protect her as attackers launch a sudden, deadly ambush. Adelis is paralyzed with terror as blades suddenly pierce through the carriage window. A sharp gasp escapes her as the Emperor's voice cuts through the chaos. Rayhan stands at the carriage door, blocking the silhouette of the approaching assassins.
With a deadly calm expression, he demands that the attackers wait a moment.
A sudden roar sounds as Rayhan steps out, drawing his sword to confront the ambushers.
Rayhan sternly tells Adelis to stay hidden inside, promising a swift return.
A loud clang sounds as Rayhan orders his knights to guard the carriage at all costs. Narration reveals the many attempts on Rayhan's life since his ascension to the throne. Rayhan notes he has ruthlessly eliminated all opposition to ensure a safe future for Adelis. A violent crack sounds as a blade aimed for Adelis shatters the carriage window. Rayhan's eyes flare with a cold fury, incensed that anyone would dare target his wife. A sudden roar sounds as Rayhan commands his men to seize every single attacker. Adelis cowers in the corner of the carriage, trembling as the sounds of battle rage outside.
She realizes with growing dread that this ambush was never mentioned in the prophecy book.
A rhythmic thud sounds as Adelis realizes with horror that someone is approaching the door. A loud bang sounds as a dark figure throws open the door, prompting her to scream. Blood drips from the fingers of the hand gripping the edge of the carriage door. Rayhan appears at the entrance, telling a shell-shocked Adelis that it is finally over. He smiles with blood on his face, trying to reassure her that she is safe.
Adilis is overcome with horror, seeing him as the bloody executioner from her recurring nightmares.
Rehan tries to check on her, but she recoils, sobbing her hatred for the violence.
He realizes he has frightened her and promises to clean himself immediately.
Rehan is taken aback as Adilis begins to mutter something under her breath. Adilis collapses into unconsciousness, her final plea being a simple wish to live.
The screen fades to black as the scene shifts back to the lady's name.
A soft rustle sounds as the pages of a book open to a familiar nightmare. Adilis reflects on the vivid dream where she dies at the hands of the Emperor.
She gazes upon the image of her own demise, a constant shadow over her life.
A heavy thud sounds as she experiences the nightmare again, hearing Rehan's voice. A close-up focuses on the intricate imperial jewel fastened to the man's chest. Rehan calls her name again, his expression unreadable in the dim light.
A sharp gasp escapes her as Adilis jolts awake, her eyes wide with lingering terror.
Rehan leans over her bed, asking softly if she is finally awake after her ordeal.
A piercing scream sounds as the memory of the nightmare clashes with the reality before her.
Adilis huddles against the headboard, terrified that Rehan has come to fulfill the bloody prophecy. A rhythmic tap sounds as Rehan approaches, but she begs him to stay away. Tears stream down her face as she prays to survive this encounter with the Emperor. A dark, abstract tension fills the room as Adilis struggles to process her surroundings.
Rehan asks if she recalls the promise he made to her many years ago.
He pulls her into a gentle, protective embrace, his expression full of warmth. Rehan promises to hold and comfort her whenever she feels frightened or lost.
He assures her that she will feel better soon as he holds her close.
Rehan confirms that he is here for her, just as he always intended to be.
A flashback shows the young boy wiping tears from the face of the young lady.
The young Rehan looks at her with a soft, adoring gaze in the past.
He pulls the young Adilis into a comforting hug, shielding her from her sorrows.
Rehan admits that he deeply regretted leaving her side for so many long years.
A close-up shows Adilis' eye widening as she begins to remember their shared history.
Rehan apologizes for causing her such worry and asks how she is feeling now.
Adilis confesses that the shock of the situation caused her to lose consciousness. Looking downcast, the red-haired man apologizes for showing an unsightly side and promises to be more careful. Adilis observes him, realizing that he was only acting out of a desire to protect her. With a look of sincere gratitude, she thanks the man for saving her life. She pulls him into a warm hug, expressing her heartfelt appreciation for his protection.
He asks if his old promise is still valid, confirming it will remain so for their entire lives.
He vows to save her in any situation, and she playfully insists that he absolutely must.
She reflects on how the boy from her childhood and the destined tyrant are the same person.
She realizes that her current actions might determine whether he truly becomes a tyrant in the future.
Startled by the intimacy, she begins to speak while remaining held in his arms.
He rests a hand on her blonde hair, confessing that he never wants to let her go.
He explains that his past lowly status forced him to let her go against his will.
A sharp gasp escapes her as he suddenly scoops her up, declaring that things are different now.
He expresses a desire to experience everything they missed, leaving her curious about his specific plans.
A soft trickle sounds as deep red wine is poured into a waiting glass.
He presents a vintage wine, which she finds impressive for its excellent aroma.
A floating thought bubble asks if a 21-year-old wine is considered sufficiently aged.
Looking at the red-haired man's scarred chest, she wonders how their situation shifted so drastically. She worries she's too heavy to carry, but he dismisses her concerns with a smile.
Sensing her needs, he correctly identifies that she has become hungry during their time together. He continues to carry her through the grand hallway toward their next destination.
She asks to be put down, but he insists on holding her since they are currently alone.
He offers to personally escort her to the dining hall as she looks on with a blush.
A quick movement sounds as they transition through the palace interior.
She insists she is not rushing out of embarrassment, though her quick pace suggests otherwise.
The camera focuses on her feet as she walks across the polished palace floors.
She notes that the well-maintained corridors and lavish decorations finally make her surroundings feel real.
A realization dawns on her that she has truly arrived within the walls of the imperial palace.
A rhythmic tap sounds as their hands remain tightly linked while they walk together.
The man watches her closely, his expression unreadable as they continue their journey.
She asks why he is laughing, and he explains he was just reminiscing about their old days.
A chibi flashback shows a younger version of her enthusiastically leading the way. He recalls her pulling him toward a dessert shop, much to her current embarrassment.
He reveals he brought the chef from her favorite restaurant to work at the palace. Her eyes light up with joy upon hearing the chef from El Ponte is here.
He compliments her, stating she was cute back then and remains just as cute now.
He playfully asks if he was cute back then and what she thinks of him now. She looks away, privately thinking that she cannot call him cute anymore, even as a joke.
A close-up highlights the sparkle in her green eyes as she processes her feelings. She denies having any such thoughts, her face flushing as she avoids his gaze.
She insists she is being truthful, though he playfully suggests that he does not believe her.
A steady thud sounds as he asks if she feels more at ease now.
He expresses relief that her tension has faded, and she realizes how considerate he has been. She gazes at him, wondering if he has always been this gentle beneath his powerful exterior.
They share a meal where she finds the food delicious, while he encourages her to eat slowly.
A sudden knock sounds at the door before a silver-haired man enters to address the lady. The knight introduces himself as Vermin Passus, the one charged with protecting his majesty. Standing tall in his uniform, the silver-haired knight awaits her acknowledgement.
She reflects on the immense care and protection she has received from the red-haired emperor.
She offers her thanks to the knight, who replies that serving her is a great honor.
The knight leads the way, informing her that his majesty is currently waiting for her arrival.
Adilis reflects on her rapid transition from resisting the crown to becoming the empress.
She pauses, finding it difficult to accept her new reality as Rihan's wife.
Adilis suddenly feels nervous, realizing they might have to share a bedroom tonight. She struggles to reconcile the powerful man he is now with her childhood memories.
The red-haired man looks on with a calm and knowing expression. A sharp gasp escapes her as the emperor arrives, startling her while she's lost in thought.
He questions her deep concentration, so she lies, claiming interest in the palace's size.
Rehan cryptically suggests the palace isn't the only thing that's vast, leaving her puzzled. He offers her a glass of wine, explaining he specifically waited to drink with her.
She feels her face heating up as she finds herself unable to look away. The emperor's muscular, scarred chest is partially visible through his open white robe.
She panics internally as she realizes she is staring directly at his bare chest.
He describes the rare vintage's origin while she tries to focus on the wine's aroma.
A romantic atmosphere settles over the room as they stand close to one another. Heart pounding, Adilis reminds herself to stay composed despite her husband's intense proximity.
She quickly shifts her focus to the desserts, prompting him to offer to bring more.
Declining more food, she takes a small treat while citing the need for moderation. He pulls her into a back hug, suggesting they could engage in some nightly exercise.
Her thoughts race as she contemplates the suggestive implication of his invitation to exercise.
A sudden, intense flush spreads across her face as she processes his bold suggestion.
Rehan observes her deep blush while she desperately thinks of a way to escape.
Fearing the situation will escalate, she impulsively grabs the wine bottle to create a distraction.
A soft glug sounds as she pours more, insisting she can handle a larger amount.
She boasts about having a high alcohol tolerance while raising her glass in a challenge. Adilis begins to laugh and babble, reminiscing about their shared experiences from years ago.
She points a finger at him, claiming she has grown into a strong drinker.
She notes his changing tastes, mentioning he ate soggy mushrooms earlier despite his old hatreds.
Rehan gently confiscates the bottle, informing the blonde lady that she is clearly intoxicated.
Rehan looks at her intently while she slurs a denial about being drunk.
Wearing a dazed, happy smile, the Empress playfully suggests they continue their drinking session.
He turns the conversation to her past, asking how she spent the years they were apart.
She looks away sadly, claiming she lived a quiet, solitary life, mostly staying indoors.
A flashback reveals she spent most of her time isolated among towers of books.
He reflects on his own difficult journey, admitting his life has been far from ordinary.
A simple thought bubble reveals the deep suffering he endured during his absence. 7 years ago, a butler named Pograng Hillsbane approached Rehan at a carriage.
The silver-haired man identifies himself as a representative of the Grand Duke Lakeside family.
The butler delivers a message stating that the Grand Duke wishes for a meeting.
Rehan is visibly shaken when the butler addresses him by his hidden name, Kieran.
The boy demands to know how the man could possibly know his true identity. The man mentions the time Rehan was kidnapped and sold into the fighting arena.
Rehan admits he has no memories of the time before his life as a gladiator.
He questions why they believe he is Kieran, and the man cites reliable intelligence. The butler explains the terrifying efficiency of the Lakeside family's vast intelligence network.
Rehan realizes this alliance could provide the lady he loves with much higher status.
The butler invites him to the residence, but Rehan asks for time to consider. Hearing that Adilis was a consort candidate, the Grand Duke decided to take action. He sought out greater power solely to protect the woman who was most precious.
In the past, Adilis called out to him, begging him to return to her.
Crying, she asked him to fulfill his promise, unaware he was seeking power for her.
A creaking sound echoes as a voice welcomes a son home.
A red-haired man in bed hears his father demand he fulfill a grudge.
The man promises an even greater reward if the emperor is brought down. Determined to stand by his lady, Rehan vows to personally behead the emperor.
The title screen appears for Don't Obsess, Please Divorce Me. He endures grueling training and countless assassination attempts to gain ultimate power. Young Rayhan's fierce determination shines through as he faces dangerous battles.
He systematically eliminates traitors while gathering followers to overthrow the throne.
A quiet moment reflects the immense pain and suffering he endured. Adilis expresses deep sympathy for the hardships he overcame to be here. Rayhan smiles gently, admitting the struggle was worthwhile to reach this moment.
Rayhan explains that desperation fuels motivation. Adilis asks if he achieved his goal.
Adilis offers a bright congratulations while affectionately patting the red-haired man's head. Rand blushes slightly, asking the blonde lady for permission to be childish. In a chibi vision, he requests more head pats for his past suffering.
Adilis impulsively grabs the wine bottle, offering to pour another drink.
Rayhan stands up, advising her to stop drinking and get some rest. He notes they finish the bottle. She realizes she's more intoxicated than expected.
Adilis collapses onto the bed, dazed by how quickly the alcohol took effect.
A smooth movement sounds as Rayhan places his hand near her on the back.
Rayhan leans over her, creating an intimate and tense atmosphere in the bedroom.
Adilis gasps as she realizes the suggestive position they are currently in.
A rhythmic thumping sounds as she realizes he is 4 years younger than her. Shirtless and scarred, Rayhan looks down and asks if she feels nervous. Adilis thinks to herself that being nervous is the only natural reaction.
Rayhan expresses relief that she finally acknowledges him as a man.
He kisses her hand, admitting he feared she would only see his younger self. She finds his current intensity a stark contrast to his earlier childish requests. A soft gulp sounds as Adilis struggles to maintain her composure.
She admits he is undeniably different from the boy she once knew.
A glint appears in his eye as he processes her acknowledgement.
A soft sound accompanies his hand reaching toward her face. He places a finger on her lips, confirming that his change is real. A steady thumping sounds as he tells her she remains unchanged. He leans in closer, his gaze fixed on the blonde woman beneath him.
Rayhan smiles and expresses his liking for the current situation.
He confesses to being impatient while leaning down toward her.
Rayhan's feet touch the floor as he claims to be exercising extreme restraint.
Rayhan admits holding back is difficult. Adilis reminds him they aren't married yet.
Rayhan grins, asking if that means he can stop holding back after the wedding. A sudden movement sounds as Adilis is left bewildered by his rapid understanding. Rayhan excuses himself to give instructions, leaving the room to cool the tension. A creaking door sounds as he tells her to rest until their wedding.
A thumping sound echoes as Adilis sits alone, stunned by his sudden departure.
She blushes furiously, realizing he was genuinely worried about her perception of him. The sun rises over the palace, marking the arrival of the next morning.
Adilis sips her tea, cringing at her behavior from the previous night. Rand leans in to ask if she has finished with her meal.
He tells her he has a surprise to show her, leaving her curious.
Rhythmic footsteps sound as they walk together toward his next revelation. Rain explains that he moved all her books to the palace. Adilis loves the thoughtful gesture.
Adilis's attention is suddenly drawn to a briefcase glowing with a mysterious, intense light.
Startled by the brilliance, Adilis realizes the light is emanating from a book inside the trunk.
A bright flash sounds as Adilis stares at the glowing briefcase with wide, surprised eyes.
Rayhan notes his office is nearby, while Adilis marvels at the vast collection of books. With a soft smile, Rayhan informs her that she is welcome in his office anytime.
Observing her pale complexion, Rayhan pulls out a chair and suggests she take a seat.
Adilis wonders how to proceed, as her desire to read the glowing book is immediate. Trying to hide her agitation, Adilis politely asks Rayhan for a few moments of privacy. A heavy thud sounds as Rayhan remains seated while maids tidy the room in the background. Finding him still present, the blonde lady questions why he has not yet left the study.
Rayhan makes a pained expression, reminding her she previously expressed a desire for his constant presence.
In a cute chibi form, Adilis frantically insists she is happy despite the unfamiliar palace environment. She admits her profound worry after he departed so abruptly in the middle of the night. Rayhan turns away, looking thoughtful as he mentions their close friendship during their younger years.
Adilis fumbles with her dress, explaining that becoming the Empress was an entirely unexpected development.
Leaning in with a sly grin, Rayhan asks if she was genuinely concerned for his well-being.
She stammers an admission of her concern, while he reflects on her past words about marriage. Rayhan looks down at her hands, recalling a pivotal question about the possibility of their marriage. Lost in thought, she reflects on the gravity of their potential union and the uncertainty ahead. She looks at him in shock, realizing he was holding on to those childhood words all along.
A rhythmic thumping sounds as Rayhan leans down, asking directly for her opinion on the matter.
A sudden, sharp tap sounds as a messenger announces the arrival of Imperial Guard Commander Hout. Rayhan asks her to wait before excusing himself, leaving the blonde woman alone in the room. Clutching her racing heart, Adelis breathes a sigh of relief that she survived the tense encounter. A magical hum sounds as Adelis opens the glowing book, certain that the future has changed. A dark, hazy vision appears, showing a shadowed, terrifying version of Rayhan she hopes to avoid.
In the vision, Rayhan coldly instructs an empress to maintain her dignity among the imperial family.
With an icy gaze, Rayhan offers to spare her from death if she simply admits her crimes.
Adelis is paralyzed by the sight of Rayhan as a tyrant, questioning if he truly changed.
A heavy rhythmic thumping sounds, echoing the overwhelming fear and tension within the vision's dark atmosphere.
Rayhan embraces a dark-haired woman, confirming Adelis's fear that he has indeed changed for the worse. A bright flash sounds as a question about why he remains unchanged fills the golden space. Gripping the book tightly, Adelis reminds herself that the future is still unwritten and unknown.
A soft hum sounds as Adelis resolves to prevent Rayhan from ever becoming a cruel tyrant.
In a new vision, a blonde woman in a pink dress asks for a clear explanation.
The blonde woman in pink stands tall, claiming she does not understand the meaning of his words.
Rayhan stands over documents, accusing the woman of hiring assassins through a servant on April 16th. He glares intensely, questioning her continued ignorance, while she remains firm in her denial of any involvement. A rustling sound accompanies falling papers as the woman is labeled a person of unknown social status. Facing him with fury, the blonde lady in pink asks if he truly intends to dismiss her.
Rayhan dismisses the murder attempts but highlights a far more serious crime against the entire empire.
A dark shadow falls over Rayhan as he accuses her of providing weapons to the kingdom of Cerny. A sharp gasp escapes the blonde woman as she realizes the severity of the Emperor's accusations.
A dark-haired woman in white robes suddenly arrives, pleading with the Emperor to forgive the Empress. Kneeling before him, the dark-haired woman begs for mercy and a lighter punishment for the accused.
Embracing the dark-haired woman, Rayhan declares that conspiracy is a grave crime that cannot be easily forgiven.
Shaking with visible terror, Adelis struggles to process the horrific events unfolding within the magical book's vision. The blonde woman in pink screams that she would not be wretched if given half his affection.
A sharp snap sounds as Rayhan asks if she failed to prepare after joining the imperial family. A sudden command sounds as guards seize the blonde woman in pink, ordering her immediate imprisonment.
A creaking sound echoes as Rayhan embraces a dark-haired woman, cold-heartedly dismissing the Empress's desperate pleas. A sinister and triumphant smile spreads across the dark-haired woman's face as the Empress is led away. A close-up reveals the Empress's wide, terrified eye as she witnesses the dark-haired woman's hidden malice. The scene shifts back to the quiet library as a heavy thud sounds among the shelves.
A book with a red and gold cover falls through the air toward the library floor.
A heavy thud sounds as Adelis collapses in shock, prompting the silver-haired knight passes to rush to her.
Knight passes ask if she is ill. Adelis, clutching her head, insists she only felt momentarily dizzy.
The silver-haired man accepts her dismissal with a quiet acknowledgement before stepping back from the blonde woman.
Alone again, Adelis breathes heavily while struggling to stop her hands from trembling after the horrific vision.
A vision of a cold-eyed, fur-clad Rayhan fills her mind as she resolves to be mentally prepared.
Adelis exhales sharply, finding the future where her companion becomes a cruel tyrant, almost too much to bear. Despite her fears, she determines to make a plan to change the future that hasn't happened yet.
Reaching for the glowing book again, the blonde woman wonders if there is more content within its pages. The vision resumes with a scream as the blonde Empress in pink is forcibly restrained by Imperial guards. Dragged through the hall, the Empress screams about her status while a guard tells her to come quietly.
Returning to the present, Adelis thinks about her heavy formal dress and her fear of encountering Rayhan soon. A steady thumping sounds as heavy boots approach, signaling a confrontation in the Imperial hallway.
The silver-haired knight commands the guards to release the Empress, shocking everyone present with his bold interference.
Adelis realizes Knight Passes was the only one on her side and asks him to wait a moment.
A shocked realization hits Adelis as she reads that the knight was her only ally in that future.
The scene pauses as a recruitment notice calls for new translators and editors to join the team.
Knight Passes stands firm against the guards as they prepare to take the blonde woman into custody. Facing her accusations, the Empress frantically denies any involvement in a conspiracy against the imperial family. Adelis reads that the silver-haired man was her only ally and wonders about her true future self.
Determined to find answers, the blonde woman decides to examine the magical book's contents once again.
She notices a change in the book's pages, confirming that new passages have appeared within the text.
A character profile confirms that Kieran Lakeside Cronad is the male protagonist of this unfolding story.
The text explains he marries Adelis strategically, intending to eventually melt her cold and frozen heart.
In a chibi vision, Adelis thinks her heart is already permafrost compared to Rehan's warm and bright personality.
She reflects on the accusations of conspiracy and assassination, wondering why her future self would do such things. The narrative explains the emperor eventually falls in love with the person who truly melts his heart. The dark-haired saint cries, claiming she forgives the empress for the attempt on her life. Surrounded by white lilies, the saint pleads for the emperor to show mercy to the accused empress.
Adelis stares intently at the book, processing the saint's manipulative behavior and her own tragic role.
She realizes that if this book is a novel, then she is certainly not the intended protagonist.
The vision shows a dark silhouette, and Adelis suspects there is another true protagonist in this story.
Looking at the saint's unsettling and sinister smile, Adelis feels a deep sense of unease about the woman.
She pauses to consider if she misread the book or if the plot is moving faster than expected. The narrative text emphasizes that the Empress cannot admit to crimes she has never committed.
Adelis realizes the events in the vision take place in the near future, only a few years away.
She wonders what extreme events could drive her future self to take such drastic and desperate actions.
A thought enters her mind, questioning if jealousy of the saint was the catalyst for her future downfall.
In the vision, the Empress yells that she wouldn't be so wretched if she had received his affection.
Adelis realizes that if that is the case, her future fate is likely already sealed by her emotions.
A rhythmic thumping sounds as Adelis reaches a final conclusion about how to ensure her own survival.
In a chibi vision, she decides to step aside for the saint and Rehan to avoid falling in love.
Adelis smiles at the simplicity of her plan to step aside for their happiness and her safety.
A feeling of relief washes over her as she realizes the wedding ceremony has not happened yet.
Surrounded by blooming flowers, Rehan smiles warmly at the blonde woman, unaware of her new resolution.
A soft thud sounds as a single crystal-clear tear falls onto the book's open page.
Clutching her head, the blonde woman reflects that the visions were far more than she expected. Resolving to avoid a love triangle for her own safety, Adelis closes the magical book.
She notes an empty slot remains in the character list after herself, Rehan, and the saint.
Looking at the silver-haired man, she recalls he was the only person kind to her.
A sharp snap sounds as Adelis closes the book, determined to learn more about the night.
The red-haired man suddenly enters, apologizing for his lateness and hoping she didn't wait long.
Rehan calls her name while Adelis struggles to act normally and hide her lingering fear.
Rand gently cups her face, asking a concerned question as he looks into her eyes.
Gazing at her intensely, Rehan notices her eyes are red and asks what is troubling her.
Making a quick excuse, the blonde woman claims she was simply reminiscing and missing her home.
The red-haired man looks away thoughtfully, quietly acknowledging her explanation with a somber expression. Walking through a rose garden, Rehan notes the convenience of having the study near his office.
Adelis stops in her tracks, looking startled as her companion suddenly calls out her name.
Surrounded by white lilies and roses, a request is made for her to accept a gift.
Dropping to one knee in the vibrant garden, the red-haired man formally proposes to Adelis.
Surrounded by soft pink roses, he expresses his sincere gratitude for her agreement to marry him. Sliding a ring with a red stone onto her finger, he swears to always protect her. Though she thanks him, Adelis secretly resolves that she must eventually divorce and leave him.
Rehan looks back at the blonde woman, asking if they should return inside the palace. A gentle rustle sounds as the red-haired man turns, his expression unreadable as the wind blows.
Watching him, Adelis wonders if she should simply take the chance to run away now.
She quickly realizes that escaping from the watchful Imperial guards would be an impossible task. A quick snap sounds as Rehan reaches out and firmly takes her hand in his. Looking down at her, the man explains that he has something important to tell her. He asks for her thoughts on marriage, leaving the blonde woman momentarily stunned by the question.
A rhythmic thumping sounds as he approaches, vowing to provide only beauty for her to see. With an intense gaze, the red-haired man promises to give her everything her heart desires.
Embracing her, he mentions wanting children. Adelis freezes in total shock at the sudden suggestion.
Startled by his forwardness, the blonde woman questions why he is already thinking about children.
Adelis awkwardly agrees while asking to be released, feeling overwhelmed by his sudden and direct intensity.
He refuses to let go, leaving the tiny chibi version of the woman completely bewildered.
Rehan admits that letting her go once was regrettable and insists he will not do so again.
Embracing her tightly, he vows not to release her until her heart finally finds its peace.
Adelis reflects that his gentleness gives her a groundless hope she struggles to ignore.
She wonders if his love is real or if he will change when the saint appears.
The scene shifts to the next morning as the sun rises over the grand imperial palace.
Surrounded by her maids, the blonde woman asks what could be wrong so early.
A maid explains that the Chamberlain has requested her presence for an urgent and important matter.
Turning around in surprise, Adelis sees her companion approaching her with an unexpected announcement.
Rayhan gestures toward a line of men, introducing the candidate knights who will serve as her escorts.
Adelis is shocked to see knight passes among them, delighted that good fortune arrived so quickly.
Looking up at the silver-haired knight, the blonde woman smiles brightly, feeling a sense of relief.
The Emperor explains they will select 3 knights for rotating shifts to ensure her constant protection.
In a chibi vision, Adelis insists she is fine on her own as Rayhan looks worried.
She asks to choose her own knight and immediately points to the silver-haired knight passes.
Adelis stands near the knight, noting that his familiar face makes her feel much more comfortable.
A red wolf growls as a dark realization hints that this choice will lead to future regret. Looking annoyed, Rayhan suggests any other knight would be better than her specific silver-haired choice.
While Rayhan sulks in the background, Aedelis asks Knight Passes how he feels about his new role.
The silver-haired knight Vermin Passus bows slightly and expresses that serving her is an absolute honor.
Rayhan dismisses the guards, insisting there is no need to guard her while she is with him.
Adelis watches the guards leave, wondering why he assigned escorts only to immediately send them away.
Leading her by the hand, the red-haired man promises to take her somewhere she will truly enjoy.
With a playful and mysterious smile, Rayhan maintains that the destination of their walk is a secret. A soft click sounds as the blonde woman's stylish white heel makes contact with the floor.
Walking past another stationed guard, Adelis continues to question their destination as she is pulled along. Rayhan requests her to step back as they reach a set of massive, ornate golden doors.
A brilliant golden light floods the hallway as the heavy imperial doors are finally opened. The blonde woman's eyes widen in sheer astonishment at the magnificent sight revealed before her. A vast room filled with overflowing treasure chests and glittering pedestals stretches out before her.
Stunned into silence, Adelis realizes that she is standing within the imperial treasury.
Rayhan declares that everything in the room belongs to her, leaving the woman completely speechless.
He encourages her to take whatever she wants, though she finds his generosity hard to believe. A soft rustle sounds as Adelis carefully gathers a variety of brilliant gemstones into her hands.
Delighted by the rare and beautiful jewels, the blonde woman's expression shifts to one of joy. Rayhan admits he expected her to be happy, but her intense excitement exceeds his expectations. In a chibi vision, he recalls her long-standing passion for collecting expensive and unique jewels. While admiring a pink diamond, Adelis secretly thinks about how these will fund her divorce settlement.
The red-haired man watches her with a look of deep affection as she admires the treasure.
Adelis asks for final confirmation that she can take everything, which Rayhan grants with a smile.
Looking slightly suspicious, she suspects he might have ulterior motives despite his seemingly perfect behavior.
Rayhan offers her the treasury key, prompting a grateful and joyous hug from the blonde woman.
Pulling back slightly, the man questions if a simple thank you is the only reward. Embracing her closely, Rayhan admits he anticipated a much more intimate reaction for such a gift.
A gentle rustle sounds as he reaches out to stroke her golden hair with a touch.
Startled by the sudden intimacy, Adelis freezes as the man plants a soft kiss on her forehead.
A soft moi sounds as he pulls her closer, his gaze full of undeniable longing.
Rayhan asks why she won't return his affection, leaving the blonde woman flustered and blushing.
The realization hits her that he is waiting for a kiss, causing her to freeze.
A soft chew sounds as she recalls a past moment of shared intimacy between them.
Feeling overwhelmed and hesitant, Adelis wonders if she should truly follow through with his request. She points out that they are not even married yet, hoping to delay the romantic confrontation. Rayhan leans close, warning her to prepare herself mentally for what comes after the wedding ceremony. He casually mentions that foreign envoys will arrive next week to attend their upcoming wedding. Stunned by the news, the blonde woman realizes the wedding is happening much faster than expected.
Rayhan confirms the wedding date is only 2 weeks away, much to her visible and vocal shock.
In a chibi vision, he reassures her that he has already organized handmaidens and schedules. A collection of exquisite gowns and jewelry is displayed, proving that every detail is already planned.
Rayhan tells her she needn't worry, making her realize he prepared long before her arrival.
He leads her toward her quarters, explaining that her handmaidens are already waiting to begin. Filled with a sudden, fiery determination, the blonde woman stares ahead with intense resolve. Adelis boldly vows to finalize her divorce within 2 weeks, regardless of any obstacles. A tiring day passes as Adelis endures endless measurements and design choices for her outfits. A soft rustle sounds as the blonde woman's hand grips a letter covered in elegant handwriting. Letting out a weary sigh, she resolves to pull herself together and complete her tasks. A mental map illustrates her plan to build relationships to aid and escape beyond the border. Night passes, asks after her well-being while Adilis smiles, determined to build an alliance with him.
The silver-haired knight presents her with a formal memo recently sent by the imperial minister.
Reading about a count's broken engagement, Aedilis decides she must absolutely avoid mentioning the sensitive topic.
Adelis ponders the Count's broken engagement, realizing a conflict between families is behind it. Sitting with Night passes, the blonde woman suddenly has a startling and desperate realization.
She asks the silver-haired knight about the Count's broken engagement, hoping to learn a lesson.
Aedilis smiles brightly, convinced that studying the Count's specific method will finally help her.
Night passes, explains the breakup was due to family conflict, leaving Adilis feeling completely defeated. A soft rustle sounds as she realizes her plan to use family drama won't work.
The scene shifts to a desk piled high with important documents and imperial stamps. Buried under a mountain of paperwork, Rayhan responds to a sudden knock at his door.
Adilis enters the study, asking the red-haired emperor if they can talk for a moment. Approaching him tentatively, the blonde woman is met with Rayhan's concerned question about her visit. She brings up the many duties of an empress, her expression carefully neutral and focused.
Deciding to act incompetent, Aedilis claims she lacks the confidence to handle any imperial duties. She hopes appearing useless will make him lose interest, but he immediately rejects the idea.
Rayhan explains that officials already handle those tasks, so she has nothing to worry about.
Looking worried, the blonde woman asks if people will criticize her for neglecting her responsibilities.
Rayhan embraces her gently, promising she can just be at ease while Aedilis mourns her failure.
Quickly changing tactics, she pulls away and declares that there is something she wants. Aedilis joyfully requests the mermaid's tears necklace, beginning her second plan of using greed. She secretly believes that acting like an extravagant and greedy woman will surely kill his affection. Rayhan thoughtfully notes that the jewelry sold for the highest price ever at a recent auction.
Seeing his somber expression, Aedilis wonders if she finally went too far with her expensive demand.
She asks if he has seen the necklace before, hoping her request has caused some friction.
Rayhan reveals that the necklace is already in her drawer, leaving the woman completely speechless.
Shimmering with light, the magnificent mermaid's tears necklace is revealed to be in her possession. In a chibi vision, the red-haired man offers to help her try on the beautiful gift.
A soft rustle sounds as he carefully takes the delicate jeweled chain into his hands.
Moving behind her, Rayhan begins to fasten the exquisite necklace around her slender neck. A rhythmic thumping sounds as Aedilis blushes deeply, feeling overwhelmed by his sudden close proximity.
The ornate necklace is perfectly placed against her skin, sparkling brilliantly in the soft light.
A rhythmic thumping sounds as she feels a burning heat wherever his fingers touch her.
Feeling flustered, Aedilis reflects that she should have called a maid to avoid this intimacy. Rayhan asks if she likes the jewelry while they both look at her reflection. A soft moi sounds as he leans in to plant a gentle kiss on her shoulder. Startled by the sudden affection, the blonde woman yelps as Rayhan apologizes for his lack of restraint.
She freezes when he promises to be careful for only the next 2 weeks before their wedding.
A rhythmic thumping sounds as he vows that after the wedding, he will no longer hold back.
Aedilis panics, realizing that if this continues, she might actually fall for the red-haired emperor.
Moving to the royal garden, the blonde woman tells Rayhan she needs to speak with him seriously. Standing firm, Aedilis declares to the surprised man that she cannot become his empress.
Rayhan hands her a red rose, playfully suggesting that her empress duties aren't the real problem.
Aedilis resolves that she must get away immediately before her feelings for him grow too strong. Rayhan asks what the real issue is, promising to solve anything that is troubling her heart.
A flower-filled banner announces her third attempt at sabotage involves a fake secret lover.
Gripping the rose tightly, the blonde woman boldly claims that she actually has someone she likes. Rayhan's expression shifts to one of cold intensity as he demands to know the man's identity.
A cold aura surrounds him as Aedilis realizes his dark expression is exactly like the book's villain.
A sudden thud sounds in her heart as she frantically tries to think of a believable name.
Under immense pressure, she blurts out the name of the eldest Bryce son, Luther Bryce.
Rayhan looks stunned, remembering that Luther Bryce was the one who asked her to dance years ago.
A sepia-toned memory shows a young Luther Bryce asking a surprised Aedilis for a dance. Rayhan questions if she actually danced with the man, but the blonde woman admits her heart merely wavered while they spoke.
Pleading with the red-haired emperor, Aedilis desperately repeats that she cannot become the empress.
She asks for the engagement to be broken, only to be met by Rayhan's sudden and forceful refusal.
Looking deeply pained, the red-haired man declares that he absolutely cannot grant her request for a breakup.
Rayhan abruptly ends the conversation, telling her to return to her room to rest since it is late.
A soft rustle sounds as the red rose falls from her hand, abandoned on the floor.
Adilis hopes that once the actual saint arrives, Rayhan will eventually be grateful for her efforts to leave.
The scene shifts to the Grand Imperial Palace as a new day begins.
Entering the study, the blonde woman asks why the red-haired emperor was looking for her.
Rayhan dismisses his personal servant before turning his attention to the arriving Adilis.
A soft rustle sounds as the servant hurries out, leaving the couple alone in the quiet study.
Rayhan confronts her about the lie, pointing out that Luther Bryce lost his inheritance years ago.
He looms over her with a cold intensity, demanding to know the truth behind her fake lover. The red-haired man casually mentions the servant who just left the room a moment ago.
He reveals that the man was actually Luther Bryce, leaving the blonde woman completely stunned by her mistake. Paralyzed by shock, Adilis realizes she failed to recognize the man she claimed was her secret lover.
Rayhan notes that the man claimed to have had no contact with her since their debutante ball.
He asks why she claimed to want to be with another man when she previously asked to run away with him.
Rayhan asks if the duties of the Empress are truly the reason for her sudden change of heart.
A soft rustle sounds as his hand trembles, Rayhan admitting he thought he could handle her liking someone else until they met again.
He somberly admits that he was wrong about being able to stay away from her. Pulling her into a desperate embrace, Rayhan admits his greed for her affection only continues to grow.
He begs her to care only for him, while Adilis mentally protests that he should be with the female protagonist instead.
A soft rustle sounds as the Emperor holds her tightly among the blooming flowers. Rayhan declares that there is no one else in the world for him but her.
The scene shifts to the palace gardens as the sun shines brightly over the estate.
A soft scratch sounds as Adilis crosses out her third failed plan for a divorce.
Letting out a weary sigh, the blonde woman laments her total failure to sabotage the engagement. Realizing the wedding is imminent, she resolves to use her final, most desperate resort.
Sitting with her back to the silver-haired knight, Adilis vows this will be her absolute last attempt. Knight Passus remains silent, his expression unreadable as he watches the blonde woman's resolve.
Approaching Rayhan's study, Adilis tentatively calls out his name to announce her arrival.
She notices he has been listless since yesterday, prompting her to approach him with a question.
Rayhan confirms he was working as the blonde woman asks what he is currently doing.
A soft scratch sounds as his pen stops, Rayhan welcoming her request to sit beside him.
He stands up to accommodate her, his expression softening at her sudden presence.
Adilis recalls an article she read, convinced that her new plan will finally succeed.
The text suggests that becoming overly clingy and obsessive is the fastest way to end a relationship.
A soft chuckle sounds as the blonde woman smiles, determined to become a burden he cannot stand.
Rayhan asks what she was looking at, noticing her intense focus on his work papers. He explains the documents concern trade tariff rates, and Adilis enthusiastically asks to see them. A soft rustle sounds as he hands her the paperwork, happy to share his work with her. Rayhan looks surprised as the blonde woman points out a specific error in the calculations. Both of them lean over the documents, Rayhan confirming that she found several numerical discrepancies. A soft ting sounds as Rayhan rings a small golden bell to summon his staff.
He orders the servant to have the director resubmit the documents since the Empress found an error herself.
In a chibi vision, Rayhan is delighted by her competence, while Adilis worries she accidentally made herself more appealing.
A maid arrives with a cart of snacks, providing the blonde woman with a perfect opportunity.
A soft gulp sounds as Adilis prepares herself for the temporary embarrassment of her new performance. Pointing aggressively at the maid, she loudly demands to know the woman's identity and her relationship with Rayhan.
Adilis apologizes in a chibi thought bubble for her attempt at fake jealousy.
Rayhan questions if her behavior stems from a dislike of him seeing other women.
The blonde woman confirms her fake jealousy, leading the Emperor to inquire about knights.
The maid is dismissed as Adilis mentally promises her a generous bonus later. Realizing the consequences, she asks who will perform the necessary tasks in the maid's absence.
Rayhan suggests that Adilis herself take over the responsibilities she was so protective over.
He shocks her by listing intimate duties like helping him change and bathe.
A glowing vision of a shirtless Rayhan appears as Adilis's imagination runs wild.
Overwhelmed by the mental image, the blonde woman covers her bright red face.
Rayhan teases her about her obvious blushing, but she quickly denies thinking of anything scandalous.
A soft rustle sounds as the blonde woman turns away, trying to hide her embarrassment.
A soft rustle sounds as the red-haired emperor reaches up to adjust his collar. He asks with a sly smile if she truly wants to see what's underneath.
Adilis is left stammering in shock, her face a deep shade of crimson.
She aggressively grabs his collar, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing.
Rayhan counters her demands, pointing out her sudden change of heart regarding the maids.
Admitting her mistake, the blonde woman focuses on fixing his disheveled collar herself. Standing close, Rayhan asks if his presence has finally begun to appeal to her. Looking conflicted, Adilis admits she isn't entirely sure of her own feelings anymore.
Rihan admits he actually finds her newfound obsession with him quite pleasant.
The red-haired emperor leans in close, his face framed by a backdrop of blooming flowers. He encourages her to become even more obsessed while Adilis mentally cries over her failure.
In a chibi vision, Rihan dares her to try and annoy him while he works.
Determination flares in Adilis' eyes as she takes his challenge to heart.
The blonde woman urgently demands he hand over the documents he's working on.
A close-up reveals Rihan's intense, focused gaze as he watches her. The Emperor's expression remains unreadable as he keeps his amber eyes fixed on her. A soft poke sounds as Adilis touches his arm, telling him to focus on work.
She smiles mischievously, comparing his reaction to a puppy she once raised.
A chibi memory shows a young Adilis being bothered by a persistent golden dog.
A soft poke sounds as her finger presses firmly against his expensive sleeve.
Rehan closes his eyes with a patient smile, telling her she can do as he pleases.
A sharp gasp sounds as the atmosphere suddenly shifts between the two.
Adilis finds herself pinned against the sofa cushions, staring up at him in surprise. Rehan tells her firmly to stop testing his patience with her antics.
He looms over her on the sofa, questioning her persistent attempts to provoke him. Rihan clarifies that he doesn't find her bothersome and never will. Adilis is stunned by his declaration, especially since she believes she has little time left.
A floral banner announces that only 10 days remain until the grand imperial wedding.
Rayon leans down to plant a gentle kiss on her hair as she lies beneath him.
Rehan expresses his wish for the final days to pass without any complications. The garden table stands ready with tea and snacks in the sunlight. Burying her face in her hands, Adilis laments her total failure to break the engagement. She wonders if her methods of sabotage were fundamentally flawed from the start. Adilis considers the possibility that she is simply too attractive for the plan to work. Adilis turns to Knight Passes, asking for his honest and unbiased evaluation of her. The silver-haired knight is visibly shaken by the prospect of judging the future empress. He nervously stammers out that she is someone very good and worthy of service. In a chibi vision, the knight expresses his terror at the idea of the emperor seeing this. Passes imagines his own demise, certain the emperor's jealousy would lead to his execution. A peaceful silence settles over the lush greenery of the palace garden. Adilis looks distressed, questioning her own attractiveness as she contemplates her failed plans. A gray-haired maid arrives at the garden table, announcing that the Sacred Empire's delegation has arrived. A narrative bubble reveals a sudden and unexpected change in the composition of the delegation. Adilis grows suspicious, noting that delegation plans rarely change without a very specific reason. A soft rustle sounds as a bad feeling begins to settle over the blonde woman.
A soft click sounds as Adilis' white heels strike the floor while she walks with purpose.
The maid explains that a female priestess arrived instead of the high priest, confusing the staff.
Adilis realizes this newcomer must be the original saint from the storybook she once read.
Her eyes sparkle with relief as she considers how the saint's arrival finally makes divorce possible. A soft rustle sounds as Adilis stops short, her gaze fixed on an unexpected sight. A soft smack sounds as Rehan kisses the hand of the short-haired priestess, leaving Adilis stunned. Watching them, Adilis thinks about how the male and female leads are destined to fall in love. The blonde woman tries to convince herself that this scene is exactly what she wanted.
A soft thud sounds as Rehan drops the priestess's hand, his expression turning cold and sharp.
Looming with intensity, the red-haired emperor demands to know the meaning behind the priestess's actions. Adilis stands paralyzed, confused as to why the romantic development isn't going as she predicted.
Smiling politely, the short-haired priestess explains that hand-kissing is a tradition of respect in her empire.
Rehan remains furious, asking if her people shamelessly perform such acts in front of his wife.
Panicked, Adilis quickly intervenes to prevent a diplomatic incident between the two nations.
The priestess apologizes while Adilis tries to soothe Rehan by suggesting the visitor is simply embarrassed. Clinging to Rehan's arm, Adilis begs him to reconsider his anger before it causes lasting discord.
She admits that, more than anything, she hates being misunderstood by the red-haired emperor.
Rehan kneels to kiss Adilis' hand, asking her to help clear up the lingering tension.
Looking up with a sly and intense gaze, he suggests that his greeting holds more than respect.
The priestess watches the couple's intimate display with a silent and unreadable expression.
Rehan asks if she has anything else to say, to which she quickly and nervously declines. Dismissing the priestess, Rehan suggests she go rest from her long journey to the palace.
A soft click sounds as Rehan calls out to Adilis, his attention fully focused on her.
Rehan apologizes for the misunderstanding, but Adilis insists she is not bothered by the situation.
In a chibi vision, a puppy like Rehan asks if her jealousy was eased by the priestess's gender. A soft click sounds as Adilis moves away, admitting she has no desire to be close to the saint.
Rehan pulls her into a warm embrace, declaring he never wants to make his wife worry. Held tightly, Adilis worries that if the original leads don't fall in love, her life is in danger. From a distance, the brown-haired priestess watches the couple with a small, mysterious smile. A formal message notes that the saint seems to like Rayhan, but he shares no such feelings.
A soft hum sounds as the blonde woman's hand brushes against a book on the library shelf.
A soft thump sounds as Idola's heart races while Rayhan continues to hold her close. Breaking away, the flustered woman claims she left something important in the study and rushes out.
A soft click sounds as Adela stands alone in the hallway, letting out a heavy, weary sigh.
White flowers bloom around a thought bubble reflecting on her future role as Rehan's wife.
A soft thud sounds as Adelis hits her head in frustration, refusing to die in a love triangle.
A soft hum sounds as she resolves that her only path to survival is a successful divorce.
Turning back to the shelf, Adelis notices a specific book is glowing with a mysterious light.
A soft hum sounds as she reaches for the red book, begging it to show her a favorable future. A soft hum sounds as the scene shifts to a vibrant garden overflowing with colorful flowers.
Noble guests in formal attire mingle among the decorations as a celebration begins.
A narrative bubble confirms that the vision is taking place within the Grand Imperial Garden.
Adilis watches a silhouetted couple walk down a red carpet, realizing she is seeing her own wedding. In the vision, a future version of Adelis wears a stunning wedding gown and looks radiantly happy.
Rayhan stares forward with a cold and intensely piercing gaze.
Looking at her book, Adelis wonders why Rayhan looks so cold, like someone forced into marriage.
She notes the wedding is a week away and searches the book for other clues.
A soft glow fills the sky as the scene shifts to the palace exterior.
Noticing a figure in the distance, Adelis identifies the silver-haired man as Knight Vermin Passes.
She reflects on how the book doesn't explain her future closeness with Knight Passes. A soft gasp sounds as Adelis is struck by a sudden and confusing realization.
The silver-haired Knight Passes looks down with a deeply troubled and dark expression.
A dark screen highlights her confusion regarding his presence at her upcoming wedding. Adelis watches the wedding vision, determined to find out the reason for his dark expression.
She identifies the short-haired priestess standing among the other holy men in the garden.
The narrative confirms the priestess is indeed present with her fellow clergy at the celebration. Looking at the priestess, Adelis notes that the woman certainly has feelings for Rayhan.
A soft rustle sounds as Adelis holds a portrait of the priestess in her hand.
A formal character profile introduces the brown-haired priestess as Eli Renaid.
Adelis reads that after a difficult childhood, Eli became a saint and eventually Rayhan's empress.
A sharp slice sounds as a bloody sword depicts a family being slaughtered in the story.
In contrast, the narrative explains that the saint gains everything and lives happily ever after. A soft smack sounds as Adelis closes the book, refusing to dwell on the depressing story. Adelis looks up with resolve, declaring her primary goal is simply to survive this life.
A soft click sounds as a teacup is placed down the next day.
Adelis greets her second escort knight, a light pink-haired man named Farron.
She asks her new knight if she can be taken to see the Imperial Guard barracks. Sipping tea, Adelis plans to get close to Knight Passes to understand his wedding behavior.
Farron suggests they go immediately, surprising Adelis with the lack of any prior notice.
Seeing his confident smirk, Adelis concludes that Knight Farron has a bit of a bad personality. A chibi Adelis looks on skeptically against a starry yellow-patterned background. A peaceful blue sky is framed by the delicate branches of a flowering tree. A loud clash sounds at the training grounds where knights are practicing their combat skills. Knight Passes lets out a weary sigh as he stands in the bright morning sunlight. Arriving at the grounds, Farron calls out to a shocked Passes and his fellow knights. The knights bow as Adelis encourages them to continue their training without feeling uncomfortable.
A knight informs her the commander is absent, but Adelis explains she only came to observe.
Farron asks if she wants to watch the sparring, noting that training is still underway.
He explains sparring is training. Adelis notices his enjoyment and agrees to watch briefly. When Farron asks for volunteers, the knights eagerly shout, hoping to impress their future empress. The crowd makes way as the first match is prepared while Adelis kicks a fee.
A soft whoosh sounds as the match between Farron and Katznell officially begins.
A sharp crack sounds as their wooden practice swords collide with intense force. Adelis watches the display with wide eyes, genuinely impressed by the knight's speed.
A confident smile plays on Farron's lips as he holds his own in the fight.
Resting his wooden sword on his shoulder, Farron stands victoriously over his defeated opponent. A formal announcement sets the stage for the next match between Passes and Kanak. A sharp smack sounds as the two knights cross their wooden blades to start the match. Adelis cheers for Knight Passes as he skillfully engages his opponent in the sparring ring.
A loud shout sounds as Knight Passes is declared the winner of the duel.
Clapping her hands, Adelis enthusiastically praises the knight for being so cool.
Blushing from the praise, Passes wipes sweat from his face with a white towel.
A sharp whack sounds as Passes continues his practice session, enjoying the fun of the training. A loud roar sounds from an arena memory where Adilis once witnessed real combat.
A hand reaches toward the blonde woman as a voice asks what she's thinking.
Startled, Adilis admits she was thinking of Rayhan as the red-haired emperor appears.
A knight bows as the red-haired emperor settles in to inspect the training.
Rayhan expresses his pleasure at being on her mind while Adilis questions his arrival.
Rihan admits his worry over her being surrounded by men despite her trusted escort.
Rihan points out her previous jealousy while Adilis insists the current situation is fine.
Adilis overhears rumors of how well-matched she and the Emperor appear to be.
Rihan insists on proper etiquette while flatly rejecting the idea of her with others.
The red-haired emperor's jealousy flares as he voices his dislike for the crowd.
A narrative bubble clarifies that the visit is intended as a simple inspection. Rihan inquires about her thoughts on the performance of the Imperial Knights.
Adilis praises the knight's strength, much to the delight of the blushing guards.
A dark energy swirls as Rayhan's mention of a sword leaves Adilis stunned.
Rayhan suggests his wife experience the prowess of the knights through a live demonstration.
Sensing his underlying jealousy, Adilis worries about the intensity of his sudden appearance.
Stepping into the arena, the red-haired Emperor demands a volunteer for a duel.
As silence fills the training grounds, Knight Passus boldly steps forward to volunteer.
The silver-haired knight Passus prepares himself to face the emperor in combat.
Adilis worries about the knight's fatigue, but Passus welcomes the rare sparring opportunity.
Rayhan notes her apparent concern for the silver-haired knight with a hint of bitterness. Internally, the blonde woman realizes her deepest concern is actually for Rayhan himself.
Adilis attempts to stop the match, insisting she already knows how strong Rayhan is. Clinging to his hand, Adilis admits her fear that he might get hurt.
A gentle smile softens the red-haired Emperor's features as he looks at her. Rayhan dismisses her worries as unnecessary while preparing for the upcoming duel.
Adilis looks at Rayhan with a mix of affection and lingering apprehension. The atmosphere turns cold as Rayhan prepares to engage the silver-haired knight. The terms of the duel are set, marking the boundaries for victory or defeat.
Rihan promises not to hold the knight responsible for anything occurring during their fight.
With a chilling and intense smile, Rayhan suggests upgrading to real steel swords.
The red-haired Emperor's expression turns menacing as he awaits a response to his challenge.
Adilis cries out in absolute shock at the suggestion of using deadly weapons.
Passus questions the safety of the proposal while Adilis watches in growing panic.
Rihan recants, noting that his Empress's fear of real swords makes it impossible.
Stunned by his comment, Adilis stands in silence as the tension remains high.
Adilis realizes she fears the Emperor wielding a sword more than the weapon itself.
A dark vision depicts the Emperor as a blood-soaked warrior wielding a blade.
The formal announcement signals the official beginning of the high-stakes duel.
A firm grip tightens around the practice sword as the first strike approaches. Knight Passus focuses intensely, determined to hold his ground against the powerful Emperor. Watching the match, Adilis is paralyzed by the terrifying killing intent Rayhan radiates.
A sharp sound echoes as the two combatants' practice swords collide with force.
Rihan smiles confidently as their blades lock, praising the knight's impressive defensive skill.
Adilis watches with bated breath, desperately hoping the red-haired Emperor remains uninjured. Knight Farron provides commentary on the speed and precision of Passus's opening strike. Despite the knight's skill, Rayhan effortlessly blocks the attack with practiced ease.
Passus strains under the immense pressure of the Emperor's superior strength and technique.
Adilis is surprised by Passus's defense, but Farron knows the Emperor is unmatched.
Farron reflects on the Emperor's legendary history as a leader on the front lines.
Adilis realizes she never knew of Rihan's formidable past as a battlefield commander.
The red-haired emperor looks on with a deeply reflective and intense gaze.
He reflects on his own hidden burdens and the weight of his past.
A soft rustle sounds as he acknowledges the immense suffering he has endured.
A gentle blush creeps onto his face as his expression softens with affection.
Rihan notes that a deep desire makes any difficult path feel possible.
Rayhan smiles confidently, holding the practice sword as he faces his opponent.
A sharp clatter sounds as the two wooden blades cross in a tense stalemate.
Adilis feels his presence through his combat, finding herself unable to look away.
Blushing deeply, the blonde woman wonders how she could not love someone like him.
She reaches out, torn between her growing feelings and her fear of the future.
Adilis worries that her love might lead to her family's tragic destruction. A ghostly shadow of herself whispers, intensifying her inner turmoil and guilt.
She realizes the story is changing as her family status has already improved.
The shadow insists she already knows the truth despite her attempts to deny it.
She admits that she continues to look back even after deciding on separation.
Adilis wonders if the future could change if Rayhan never meets the saint. A heavy thump sounds in her chest as she clutches her racing heart.
Surrounded by flowers, she asks herself if she is finally allowed to love him.
A weary groan sounds as Knight passes collapses, signal to stop the duel. Rayhan hands back the sword, his face remaining cold and professional after victory.
Rihan's suspicion grows, sensing something unusual about her choice of Knight passes.
Internally, he admits his desire to harm the Knight despite restraining himself. Rihan dismisses passes for the day, and the weary Knight obediently accepts. He reflects that the intense duel provided him with a useful realization.
Rihan seeks her approval, while Adilis enthusiastically praises his performance as cool.
He scratches his head, bashfully asking if she finds him attractive once more.
Noticing her dazed state, Rayhan calls her name while she responds in confusion.
Her face becomes unusually flushed as she struggles to maintain her composure.
Adelis avoids his gaze, her trembling hands betraying her overwhelming and intense emotions. Rayhan's golden eyes widen as he focuses on her with sudden intensity. A soft hush falls as the Emperor asks for permission to kiss her.
They stand close together, the air thick with romantic tension and anticipation.
Surprised, Adelis lets out a small gasp as her face turns bright red.
She hesitates, citing their public location and the surrounding guards as a reason.
Rayhan questions her concern about others, while Adelis looks around in confusion.
A sudden whoosh sounds as the wind blows through the deserted training grounds.
Adelis searches for the guards, but Rayhan explains they have all already departed.
A soft moi sounds as he leans in close, surprising her with the speed. A flustered Chibi Adelis panics as the mischievous Emperor continues to tease her. Rihan repeats his romantic request while she shyly begs him to stop.
Rayhan asks if she dislikes his advances, causing her to stammer in denial.
The red-haired Emperor watches her with a curious and slightly surprised expression.
Adelis looks at him with wide, bashful eyes, her face completely flushed with love.
She admits that her heart feels like it is about to explode.
Rihan notes her extreme embarrassment as she makes her heart-wrenching and honest confession.
He jokes that a bursting heart would be quite problematic during their wedding.
Adelis feels mortified by the situation, hiding her face in her own embarrassment.
A soft sigh sounds as Rayhan embraces her, declaring her to be lovely.
He notes that her affection is clear through her every word and action. They share a tender hug, silhouetted against a radiant and warm floral background.
The scene shifts to an opulent palace room, adorned with a grand chandelier and heavy red curtains.
Hiding her face with a pillow, Adelis reflects on falling for the Emperor in the original story.
The blonde woman admits to herself that Rayhan became too precious for her to ever lose.
Hearing a knock at the door, Adilis invites Knight passes to enter the room.
A soft voice from outside the door asks if something is wrong with the Empress.
Entering the room, the silver-haired Knight explains he took Knight Farron's place to escort her today.
Adilis expresses her worry, reminding the Chibi Knight that he took a hard hit during his duel.
A soft trickle sounds as tea is poured, while Adilis questions why he requested the duel.
Passus explains he wanted to test his strength against the Emperor, despite Adelis's worry about his safety.
A quiet breath sounds as the silver-haired Knight addresses the Empress with a low and respectful tone.
The silver-haired Knight looks down, his expression hidden behind a curtain of silver hair and silent thought.
Surrounded by flowers, Passus asks the Empress if her heart is currently in a state of pain.
Adelis looks up with a startled expression, her eyes wide as she processes his sudden and personal question.
The scene shifts outside to a bright garden where the sun shines through the lush green leaves.
A brown-haired man and a dark-haired woman discuss the palace where the Emperor currently resides.
The man asks when she will reveal her identity, and the dark-haired woman promises to do so soon.
Back in the room, the silver-haired Knight begins to speak about what would happen if he were hurt.
Adelis insists it is only natural to be worried about the well-being of her personal escort.
A soft, sounds as Passus reflects on the distance implied by her calling him an escort.
Blushing slightly, Passus admits that it has been a very long time since he heard such kind words.
The blonde woman's eyes widen as she notices a sudden shift in the Knight's intense expression. The silver-haired Knight gazes at her, the atmosphere in the room growing increasingly heavy and serious.
Passus asks if it is permissible for an escort knight to harbor romantic feelings for his master. Stunned by his bold question, Adelis's expression turns blank as she struggles to find an answer. A Chibi Adilis points at the knight in shock, asking him to clarify his sudden and bold statement.
A soft nod sounds as the Chibi Knight confirms his true feelings with a determined and silent gesture.
A sharp "what?" sounds as Adelis recoils in absolute shock, questioning why he would say such a thing. Passus asks if she would believe it was love at first sight, leaving the Empress completely flustered.
The silver-haired Knight looks at her with a soft blush, openly declaring his genuine feelings for her.
A soft whoosh sounds as he takes her hand, causing Adilis to panic and ask why he is doing this.
Surrounded by flowers, the Knight admits that seeing her at the barracks today made him incredibly happy. Holding her hand tightly, Passes confesses that her support during the duel meant everything to him.
Adilis remembers the original story and wonders if he only liked her because she looked so sad. A soft gasp sounds as Passes acknowledges her concern for him with a look of deep longing.
Adilis urges him to think rationally, reminding him that her accepting his feelings would be a disaster.
She warns him that while she would be exiled, he would face death for daring to love the Empress.
Adilis firmly states that she cannot allow him to die simply because of his feelings for her.
Passes quickly clarifies that he only wanted to be close and has no intention of crossing that line.
The silver-haired knight looks at her with a sad gaze, asking if she could at least call him by name. A firm thump sounds as Passes steps forward, claiming a close friendship is acceptable in her current situation.
A soft tap sounds as the knight drops to his knees, desperately begging her for this one small favor.
Kneeling before her, the silver-haired knight looks up and asks her to call him by his name, Vermin.
A quiet hush falls as he asks for this special treatment only when the two of them are alone.
Hesitating as she looks down at him, the blonde woman finally gives in and speaks his name, Vermin.
A loud bang sounds as the door is thrown open, revealing the red-haired emperor in a towering rage.
Rihan asks Passes if he has a death wish, while Adilis panics over how long he has been listening. A loud thud sounds as Passes bows deeply, explaining to the Emperor why he returned to his duties.
A nervous gulp sounds as Rihan looms over the knight, accusing him of boldly defying a direct order.
Rihan coldly warns Passes not to get the wrong idea, insisting the Empress only likes him as an escort.
A sharp swoosh sounds as Rayhan's eyes glow with lethal intensity, commanding the knight to never repeat his mistake.
Rayhan pulls Adilis into a firm embrace as she softly calls out his name. He looks down at her with concern, asking if she fears he might harm Passes. Rayhan declares he wants to expel Vermin Passes immediately, but refrains due to the present delegates.
The silver-haired knight grits his teeth as the Emperor suspends him for an entire month.
A tense silence follows as Passes clenches his fist while being ordered to leave. A heavy thud echoes as the door closes, sealing the knight's exit from the room.
Rihan asks Adilis why she is crying, wondering if it's over that foolish knight. A soft sob escapes Adilis as she denies being sad about the knight's removal from duty.
Rihan questions her intentions while the blonde woman looks up at him with wide, startled eyes.
Adilis urgently clarifies that nothing untoward ever occurred between her and the knight.
A gentle hush falls as Rihan asks if she's worried about him getting the wrong idea.
She worries that the Emperor might become the cruel version of himself from the book. A single tear falls from Adilis' emerald eye as she struggles with her inner fears.
Surrounded by white lilies, a text bubble conveys Rihan's reassurance that he is not misunderstanding.
Rihan cups her face, affirming his trust in her while dismissing the knight's one-sided feelings.
A look of immense relief washes over Adilis as she hears his comforting and trusting words.
Rihan watches her with a soft and affectionate gaze, his eyes full of deep devotion.
A flustered chibi Adilis lets out a sharp gasp as the Emperor makes a bold claim.
He reminds her of his intense dislike for having other men lingering around her presence.
Rihan crosses his arms, asking how he can ensure such a situation never happens again. A chibi Rayhan insists her beauty makes caution impossible for any man who sees her. He claims every man would fall for her, leaving the chibi blonde woman completely bewildered.
Rayhan commands her to stay by his side, suggesting she read in his office instead.
Standing amidst blooming flowers, Rayhan declares they will share a bedroom starting that very day.
Adilis gasps in surprise, reminding him that they are not even officially married yet.
He admits he is already restraining his desire to be with her every hour of the day.
A romanticized vision of the couple appears, featuring a shirtless Rayhan and a smiling Adilis.
Adilis urges him to return to work while he mentions needing a vacation after the wedding.
A soft huh sounds as she asks what the purpose of such a vacation would be.
Rayhan gazes at her intensely, his silence adding weight to the romantic tension between them.
A text bubble against a floral background asks for her opinion on a certain matter.
He leans in close, suggesting a trip might be a good idea for their upcoming vacation.
A playful suggestion about spending their stamina during the vacation appears on a bright pink background.
The dark-haired saint sits for tea, sensing that the silver-haired knight has something to discuss. A mischievous smile plays on the saint's lips as she grants him permission to speak freely. The scene shifts to a serene and lush garden bathed in the warm light of dusk. Adilis apologizes to Knight Farron, who explains he is struggling after getting hit during sparring. Farron notes her flushed face while a flustered Adilis insists she is perfectly fine. Adilis feels a sense of quiet joy, realizing she is glad that Rayhan finally trusts her.
A sudden "oh my" sounds as Adilis encounters the dark-haired saint within the palace gardens.
The dark-haired woman offers a warm and welcoming greeting to the Emperor's future bride.
A brief intermission occurs as the narrative prepares for the next important encounter.
The saint expresses her delight that they can finally greet one another in person.
Adelis expresses her surprise at their chance meeting while Knight Farron stands dutifully behind her.
The saint mentions her previous attempts to meet, and Adelis politely offers a future tea invitation. The saint smiles happily as Adelis notes her initial impression of her as a kind person. The saint brings up the upcoming wedding, but Adelis admits she feels quite anxious despite her happiness. A soft "why" sounds as the saint questions the source of her unexpected and lingering anxiety.
Adelis gazes away, admitting her biggest worry is how long this current happiness will actually last.
Grasping Adelis's hands, the dark-haired woman reassures her that there will be a happy ending. Adelis smiles warmly, expressing her shared hope for a happy ending while thanking the saint. A caption marks the transition as several days pass before the upcoming wedding ceremony. The head attendant informs the empress that custom forbids the couple from meeting before the wedding.
Surrounded by a floral aura, Adelis laughs and cheerfully accepts the tradition of temporary separation.
The attendant is bewildered as Adelis celebrates the chance to finally get some quiet rest.
A chibi Adelis promises to sleep early to prepare for the busy wedding day ahead.
Resting in bed, Adelis reflects on Rehan's overwhelming presence since the knight's bold confession.
She notes that while she enjoys his company, his jealousy creates a uniquely intense atmosphere.
A romantic vision appears of the emperor holding her close with deep, focused devotion.
A soft whoosh sounds as Rehan suddenly appears at her window, surprising her in the night.
Adelis panics over the late hour, but Rehan remains unbothered as long as they stay hidden.
Rehan instructs her to find an excuse to leave the wedding banquet early the next day.
Embracing him, Adelis urges Rehan to keep his composure, and he promises to restrain himself.
Adelis watches him depart into the night, lost in a moment of silent, lingering thought.
A soft rustle sounds as she clutches her nightgown, heart racing from their secret encounter.
Rehan turns back one last time, his voice a gentle call that stops her in place.
A soft "moi" sounds as Adelis leans in to give him a sweet, unexpected cheek kiss. With a blushing smile, the blonde woman bids her future husband a very good night.
A firm click sounds as the door seals, leaving Rehan outside, calling her name in desperation.
The head attendant sternly reminds the emperor that it is time for him to go to sleep.
Rehan laments the distance while Farron encourages him to endure just one more day of restraint.
The scene shifts to the grand wedding day, where a floral arched aisle leads to the altar. Dressed in his white wedding regalia, Rehan stands at the altar, admitting he feels incredibly nervous.
Rehan asks if his bride has arrived, and an attendant confirms she is approaching the entrance.
A soft clack sounds as Adelis steps onto the carpet in her ornate white wedding gown.
Radiating beauty under her translucent veil, Adelis prepares to walk toward her husband. The blonde bride carries a delicate bouquet of white tulips and daisies as she moves forward.
Adelis marvels at her gown, finding it far more beautiful than any description in the original book.
Rehan's eyes widen in awe as he calls out to her, captivated by her stunning appearance.
The emperor offers his hand, asking for the honor of escorting her down the wedding aisle.
Adelis sees a vision of a younger Rehan, realizing his feelings have been constant for years. A text bubble describes her lingering fears finally melting away like snow in the sun.
Accepting his hand, she thinks that his presence makes her no longer fear her tragic destiny.
The couple walks together toward the altar, their white wedding outfits shining in the bright light.
Rehan cherishes the moment, while Adelis suggests his status as emperor isn't why she loves him.
Adelis reflects that she never sought the emperor specifically, only the man standing beside her now. Rehan looks down at her with a soft blush, his gaze filled with pure and unadulterated love.
The bishop begins the ceremony, speaking of the honor he feels presiding over the imperial wedding.
Rehan reflects on a memory from when he was 14 as the bishop discusses their shared future.
A silent question lingers in the air as Adelis wonders exactly what she represents to him.
Rehan explains that he sought power only to be the one who could finally reach her.
Adelis is startled when Rehan mentions her role as the mother of the next emperor.
Realizing he is simply speaking of their future family, she laughs off her momentary and silly shock.
The bishop begins the formal vows, addressing the emperor by his full name, Kirin Lakeside Cronod.
Rehan loudly declares his eternal vow of love, and the bishop turns to ask Adelis the same.
Adelis speaks clearly and with absolute certainty, promising to love her husband forever.
Surrounded by white petals, she decides to cherish the reality of this beautiful and perfect day.
A soft swoosh sounds as Rehan lifts her veil, revealing her happy and radiant expression.
Adelis thinks she could never refuse him, and Rehan warmly addresses her as his wife. A soft chew sounds as the emperor and empress seal their marriage with a passionate kiss.
Rehan declares Adelis his wife amidst a shower of soft pink petals. The bishop confirms the marriage is official as the couple shares a celebratory kiss.
The joyous sound of clapping fills the air while pink and white roses rain down.
Farron watches the celebration with a stoic expression while the guests continue their enthusiastic clapping.
A mysterious man in a dark cloak observes the ceremony alongside a woman in black.
Rihan graciously accepts the heartfelt congratulations of the noble guests during the grand wedding banquet.
Rehan questions his reputation as a romantic while eagerly awaiting his bride's return to the hall.
The hat attendant reminds Adilis to change, and Rehan encourages her to prepare for the reception.
A tiny, dramatic Rehan lets out a soft sigh, lamenting how much he misses her already.
Rehan turns as a guest approaches him with a warm congratulatory greeting in the banquet hall.
The dark-haired saint bows low, showing her respect by pressing a formal kiss to the emperor's hand.
The saint apologizes for her previous behavior, prompting Rehan to recognize her as the unusual priestess. A soft murmur rises as the crowd questions the presence of a female priestess from the empire.
A nobleman expresses his disapproval, viewing the priestess's presence as a sign of disrespect toward the crown.
A commanding voice tells the crowd to show proper respect for the woman who received revelation.
Rehan considers the shocking revelation that the woman is actually a legendary saint mentioned in ancient records. Speculation arises that her divine authority might rival that of the Pope if she possesses holy power.
The dark-haired woman formally apologizes for keeping her true identity as a saint hidden until now.
Saint Eli Reigned offers a serene and humble smile to the emperor and the gathered wedding guests. The woman clearly announces her name and title, finally establishing her high status within the court.
The saint's intense purple eyes focus on Rehan as she claims to have an urgent message.
She asks for a moment of privacy, the gravity of her request weighing heavily on the atmosphere.
The dark-haired woman persists in her request for a private conversation, ignoring the surrounding banquet festivities. Rehan hesitates to answer her request, his attention caught by a sudden development at the entrance.
A sudden gasp sounds as the Empress arrives, though she worries this mirrors the book's tragic beginning.
Rehan greets his beautiful bride with a warm smile, pleased to see her rejoin him at the banquet.
Adilis clenches her fist, silently encouraging herself to stay calm despite the saint's unsettling presence nearby.
Rehan asks Adilis if she recognizes the delegation, officially introducing the dark-haired woman as the saint.
The saint wonders how Rehan guessed her identity so quickly after her sudden and public announcement.
Adilis logically explains her reasoning, earning the saint's genuine admiration for her quick and sharp insight.
Rehan is surprised to learn that Adilis and the saint had already met privately within the gardens.
The saint playfully reminds Adilis of her promise to invite her for tea in the near future.
She further suggests that the emperor himself should join their upcoming tea party to discuss certain matters. Adilis becomes suspicious, wondering why the saint is so determined to include Rehan in their private meeting. Adilis firmly takes Rehan's arm, insisting he is far too busy with work to attend any tea. The saint expresses her disappointment while Adilis realizes this manipulation mirrors the tragedy in the original book. The saint smiles cryptically, offering to share a brief tale before they part ways for the evening. A chill fills the air as the saint asks if they have ever heard of a book predicting the future. Adilis freezes in shock, her heart racing as she hears the saint mention the very secret she keeps.
Rehan questions the existence of such an artifact, his tone reflecting a natural and logical skepticism.
While the saint describes temple records, a soft murmur sounds as the surrounding nobles discuss the book.
The saint reveals only the owner can see the contents, confirming Adilis's worst fears about its reality. Adilis desperately hopes the book only contains written sentences rather than an unchangeable and fixed destiny. The saint reiterates the book's true nature, her words echoing with an ominous and undeniable weight.
The saint's gaze turns cold as she declares that the book reveals a future that is predetermined.
When Adilis suggests the records might be flawed, the saint sharply questions if she is doubting the temple.
Adilis quickly offers an apology to diffuse the tension, which the saint accepts with a cold nod.
Rehan notices his bride's pale face and gently suggests they leave the banquet so she can rest.
Despite the saint's offer to help, Adilis refuses, though Rehan remains deeply concerned about her sudden distress.
A sharp gasp sounds as Rehan sweeps Adilis into his arms, deciding her health is more important than protocol.
Nobles gossip about the attention they're drawing, while Rehan rejects a suggestion, reminding them why he took the throne.
Rehan tenderly explains he became emperor solely to be with Adilis, though she continues to protest his disregard for protocol.
Sweeping his wife into his arms, the emperor dismisses her concerns, confident that his actions won't cause any real problems.
A soft clack sounds as Saint Eli observes the couple from across the room, her expression unreadable. A chilling swoosh sounds as the saint's eyes glow a vibrant purple, a mysterious energy swirling around her form.
In their private chambers, Adilis insists she only needs a brief rest, while Rehan remains deeply concerned about her well-being.
The miniature emperor happily encourages his wife to rest while she promises to return to the banquet very soon.
A weary sigh escapes Adelis as she sits alone on the red sofa, finally allowing herself a moment of quiet.
The saint's previous warning about a predetermined and unchangeable future echoes through the Empress's troubled thoughts.
Adelis reflects on the discrepancies between her reality and the original book, questioning the true nature of their destiny.
She recalls how her father's title and her own wedding gown have already diverged from the written story's path.
The blonde woman wonders if the process of their lives can be altered even if the final outcome remains fixed.
A dark realization settles in as she fears that the ultimate ending might remain the same despite her efforts.
Visions of a blood-stained letter and her own demise haunt her as she contemplates the annihilation of her family.
She considers the possibility that the original happy ending was always meant for the Emperor and the Saint. Shaking off the grim thoughts, Adelis tells herself that she cannot afford to jump to conclusions based on mere speculation.
The Empress feels trapped by her lack of information, lamenting that she cannot directly access the temple's secret records.
Deciding that idle rumination is useless, she resolves to find the answers she needs through more direct action.
The scene shifts back to the grandeur of the banquet hall, illuminated by massive, ornate crystal chandeliers.
A pink-haired marquis from Cerny approaches the Empress with a polite greeting, thanking her for her presence.
A surprised ooh sounds as Adelis recognizes the man as a famous war hero, hoping to build strong diplomatic ties.
The Marquis is impressed by her knowledge of his history, while a miniature Adelis expresses her long-standing interest in his country.
While Adelis praises the beauty of Cerny, Rayhan suddenly appears behind her, suggesting they all visit the country together.
Startled by the Emperor's sudden arrival, the group listens as Rayhan checks on his wife's health after her rest.
Rayhan suggests a royal vacation to Cerny, while Adelis wonders how the Emperor could possibly leave his duties behind.
The Marquis laughs heartily, promising to take full responsibility for guiding the imperial couple through his homeland personally.
Other noble guests join in, congratulating the Empress and eagerly asking if she has plans to visit their countries.
A nobleman bows respectfully, offering his own services as a personal guide should the Empress ever visit his land.
Adelis graciously accepts the invitations, expressing a genuine desire to travel and visit her international neighbors when possible.
The blonde woman beams with satisfaction, pleased that her plan to build strong diplomatic relationships is working perfectly.
Rayhan watches his wife with a proud and affectionate smile, clearly enchanted by her poise and social grace.
A servant passes by as guests murmur their approval of the new Empress and her successful debut at court. Nearby, a group of noblewomen whispers about a past scandal, noting they never expected things to turn out so well.
The ladies greet Saint Eli, who questions the meaning behind their cryptic remarks regarding the Empress's past.
Though the nobles suggest the saint wouldn't be interested, she firmly asserts her right to know the truth. They reveal that Adelis was once a candidate for the previous emperor's consort, a position she lost under scandalous circumstances.
The women emphasize that the most important part of the story is the shocking reason she was stripped of her candidacy.
The dark-haired saint listens intently, wondering what kind of scandalous tale could be hidden in the Empress's history. The noblewomen continue their quiet discussion about the Empress's past candidacy while the saint listens with sharp focus. A frustrated "ha" sounds as Adelis realizes the guests are gossiping loudly enough for the entire hall to hear.
A sudden "huh" sounds as Adelis prepares to intervene and stop the embarrassing talk before it spreads any further.
The ladies prepare to reveal the climax of their story, detailing the day the Empress supposedly ruined her reputation.
They claim that Adelis brought a young servant, not even an adult, into her bedroom in the late hours of the night.
The saint gasps in shock at the mention of a child, while a soft murmur of scandal rises among the guests.
A firm click sounds as a white-booted foot steps forward and a commanding voice confirms the lady's scandalous tale. Rayhan steps into the conversation, calmly verifying that Adelis did indeed bring a young servant to her room long ago. Adelis watches her husband in stunned silence, her face pale as she wonders what he could possibly be trying to achieve. The ladies are baffled that Rayhan already knew of the scandal, yet he insists their interpretation of the event is entirely wrong. Rayhan explains that while nothing happened, Adelis was so determined to take responsibility that she insisted on marrying the servant. The emperor leaves the saint and the nobles in stunned silence as he reveals that he was the child she brought home. An ominous realization dawns as a thought bubble notes that a specific event is scheduled to occur with him today. Adelis stands in stunned silence, her eyes wide as she processes the sudden and shocking public revelation. A noblewoman gasps in disbelief, questioning if the servant Adelis allegedly brought to her bedroom was actually the emperor himself.
Rayhan stands tall and composed beside his bride, declaring his intention to bring the Empress along with him.
The shocked noblewoman collapses as Rayhan takes Edelise's hand, marking a definitive shift in the conversation.
The Emperor and Empress share an intimate and tender look, holding hands as the surrounding chaos of the banquet fades away.
A direct question hangs in the air as Rihan suggests they retire to the bedroom for the evening.
A rhythmic click-clack sounds as the imperial couple walks away from the stunned crowd, heading toward their private quarters.
Adilis worries that the secret of the Emperor's past as a servant will cause trouble, questioning what he intends by his public admission.
Rayhan leans in close, asking if she is bothered by the memory of him in her bedroom or the nature of their marriage.
As Adilis becomes increasingly flustered, Rayhan playfully asks if she intends to bring him into her bedroom again this very day.
He presses her for an answer, leaving the blonde woman overwhelmed by his bold and suggestive line of questioning.
Rayhan apologizes for his lack of consideration, noting that neither of them has eaten since dawn. The scene shifts to a table laden with various gourmet dishes as they prepare to share a quiet meal together.
A moment of calm follows the meal, with an empty teacup and plate signaling the end of their dinner.
While putting on his jacket, Rayhan expresses his curiosity about the existence of a book that can predict the future.
Adilis, now in her white nightgown, wonders aloud if life truly proceeds according to a predetermined and fixed destiny.
The Empress looks downward with a heavy heart, deeply troubled by the implications of the saint's earlier words.
Rayhan offers to investigate the matter for her, acknowledging it will be difficult but worth the effort since she is concerned.
He insists on finding answers before the foreign delegation departs, determined to provide his wife with the truth.
Rayhan decides to arrange a formal meeting with the saint, causing Adilis to pause in deep thought.
Adilis resolves to seize this opportunity to learn about the book, despite her deep-seated fear of Rayhan and the saint meeting.
A sudden click sounds as Adilis opens the door, firmly asking to be included in the meeting with the saint.
The blonde woman enters the room with a determined look, stating she has her own questions to ask.
She stops short as she sees Rayhan's bare, muscular chest covered in prominent battle scars.
Rayhan happily agrees to her request while a blushing Adilis tries to maintain her composure after the unexpected sight.
Rayhan reassures her that as his wife she can do anything, leaving Adilis feeling deeply grateful for his support. The Emperor moves behind his wife, the atmosphere becoming charged with a sudden and intense intimacy. He leans in and whispers, asking if they should continue what they were doing before they stopped to eat.
Rayhan reminds her of her promise to prepare herself, while Adilis protests his timing in the bright light of day.
Rayhan asks if she would prefer to wait until lightfall, as the time of day makes no difference to him. Adilis hesitates to answer, her face flushing a deep red as she struggles to find the right words. A soft swoosh sounds as the Empress tightly shuts her eyes, completely overwhelmed by her husband's proximity.
Rayhan gently tilts her chin upward, forcing her to look him in the eye during their private confrontation.
Adilis feels trapped by the romantic tension, unable to find a way to escape the heavy atmosphere between them.
The distance between them vanishes as they lean closer, sharing a quiet and breathless moment of anticipation.
Rayhan looks at her with an intense gaze, asking if she truly wishes to stop their intimate encounter. A soft thump sounds as Rayhan sits on the bed, assuring Adilis that he has no intention of forcing her into anything.
Rayhan playfully promises he isn't a beast, which only makes the flustered Adilis more embarrassed.
Fidgeting with her hands, the Empress quietly admits that she simply isn't mentally prepared for this step yet.
Rayhan reveals he already knew she was hesitant, surprising Adilis with his sharp and intuitive observation.
He explains that because he is always watching her, he couldn't help but notice the change in her behavior. A soft rustle sounds as a hand rests on the bedsheet while the Emperor speaks to his wife with gentle honesty.
He acknowledges that he was the one who pushed for this marriage, making her current hesitation understandable to him.
Adilis relaxes and offers a genuine thank you, relieved that her husband is willing to wait for her.
Rayhan expresses his hope that she will be ready soon, while Adilis promises to try her best for him.
Adilis tells him she will be ready if his love remains constant, and Rayhan vows his feelings will never change.
A soft swish sounds as Rayhan strokes her face, tenderly telling his tired wife to get some rest. Adilis closes her eyes with a peaceful expression, whispering her husband's name as she drifts toward sleep. The imperial couple lies together on the bed in a moment of quiet comfort and mutual understanding.
Rayhan gazes at Adilis with intense devotion as they lie together, promising his wife he will never let her go.
The scene shifts to a sun-drenched garden as a character recalls being surprised by a message received earlier that morning. Seated at an ornate garden table, the dark-haired saint mentions how surprised she was that the Emperor requested to see her.
Rayhan explains that Adilis wanted to join the meeting to learn more about the prophetic book the saint mentioned previously. Holding a delicate teacup, the saint agrees to share some information from the temple records, though she cannot reveal everything.
A robed figure is shown in a flashback holding a glowing book up toward a brilliant, radiating light source.
The narrative explains that a believer in the past once discovered the mysterious book, though the details remain vague.
The book is shown bound tightly by numerous thick ropes as the story reveals the believer saw 10 years into the future.
A hanging noose appears as the imperial couple reacts with shock to the news that the believer took their own life.
The saint explains that the believer chose death over facing the future they had seen, preventing that specific future from ever occurring.
Adilis ponders the story, noting that the predicted future naturally failed to arrive because the person died before it could.
Looking downward in deep thought, the blonde woman realizes the profound implications of a future that can be altered by action.
Adilis reasons that if the book's predictions were truly absolute, it would have foreseen the priest taking their own life.
A brilliant white light radiates outward as the narrative suggests that the book cannot account for how a reader might act.
Adilis asks the saint if she believes a predetermined future can be changed, citing the priest's death as proof of such a shift.
Scattered pages fly from the book as Adilis wonders if the text is a warning of potential death rather than a fixed prediction. The saint insists that only something as extreme as death has ever changed a record, but Adilis maintains that anything is possible. Adilis and Rehan share a brief, silent moment of connection as they hold hands across the garden table.
The saint gazes at the empress, questioning if Adilis truly doubts the book's ability to accurately show the future.
Adilis firmly rejects the notion of an unchangeable fate, asserting that no such absolute possibility exists.
With her eyes glowing a haunting purple, the saint warns that events will happen exactly as the absolute temple records show. Adilis wonders why the saint is so insistent, as the woman claims only those who have seen the book can know the truth.
The saint turns away slightly, repeating her assertion that only the one who has looked upon the book possesses true knowledge.
The saint looks out over the lush greenery and notes the absence of the empress's personal escort knight.
A small chibi head of Rehan appears as he points toward the silver-haired knight passes standing in the distance.
A chibi head of the saint appears as she clarifies she is looking for the silver-haired knight she saw during a previous service.
Rehan identifies the man as Knight Passes, while the saint expresses a desire to meet with him at a later time.
Adilis wonders why the saint is suddenly interested in her knight, while Rehan asks if there is a specific reason for the request.
Adilis reacts with visible surprise when the saint mentions having a revelation regarding Knight Vermin Passus.
A soft, long who sounds as the saint explains revelations must be delivered in person and offers to arrange a formal meeting.
The saint adds that Adilis must also attend the meeting because the content of the revelation is directly related to the empress.
Adilis concludes that this revelation might contain information she didn't encounter in her own reading of the book and accepts the invitation. When the saint asks if the emperor will also attend, Rehan confirms that he will definitely be there.
Adilis watches the saint with suspicion, wondering if the revelation is merely a clever excuse for the woman to see Rehan again.
The blonde woman reflects on the saint's clear affection for Rehan while the dark-haired woman calmly sips her tea.
Adilis worries about the complicated dynamic between the saint, the knight who confessed to her, and her husband who wants the knight gone.
Holding her cup, a small and worried version of Adilis wonders if this upcoming meeting will truly be okay.
The saint asks to take her leave, much to Adilis' surprise given how little time has passed.
Adilis realizes the saint is deliberately drinking her tea slowly to prolong the encounter and decides to intervene.
The empress decides to counter the saint's stalling tactics with her own excuse, even if it might be considered slightly rude.
Smiling brightly, Adilis places her hands on Rehan's shoulders, determined to use a strategic excuse to end the meeting.
Adilis tells the saint she is worried about being a poor host because she didn't get enough sleep the previous night.
The saint's hands tremble slightly as she reluctantly agrees to end the meeting early following the empress's admission.
A cheerful ha-ha sounds as Rehan backs up his wife's excuse, noting that she is indeed very tired.
A soft hoo-hoo sounds as Rehan holds Adilis' hand, teasingly suggesting that last night was perhaps too exhausting for her. The emperor's lips curve into a knowing smirk as he addresses his wife with a playful and suggestive tone.
Rehan asks if they can greet the moonlight together again tonight, leaving the flustered Adilis to protest her exhaustion.
Rehan leans over Adilis and holds her hands tightly, playfully suggesting he can ensure she doesn't feel tired during their evening.
The emperor moves even closer to his blushing wife, promising to try his best despite being unable to offer a full guarantee.
A sudden thump-thump sounds as Adilis' heart races, completely shocked by Rehan's bold suggestion to do everything all at once. A sudden rustle sounds as the saint stands, stating she has finished her tea.
Rehan apologizes for his rudeness and promises to offer a formal apology later.
The saint takes her leave of the imperial couple, bidding them a final farewell.
The saint wonders if Rayhan truly forgot her presence while she stood before him.
A soft chuckle sounds as the saint smirks, finding the situation deeply interesting.
Heavy rain falls on the palace as several days pass following their previous meeting.
Gazing out at the storm, Adelis notes how particularly ominous the weather feels today.
2 sharp knocks sound at the door as an attendant announces the saint's arrival.
Rihan welcomes the saint inside, explaining they moved the meeting due to the rain.
The saint claims she is happy anywhere as long as the emperor is present.
2 sharp knocks sound as an attendant announces that Knight Vermin Passes is here.
The silver-haired knight enters the room and thanks the emperor for the formal invitation.
Adelis looks on with a confused expression as the knight approaches the seated group.
The Empress remains quiet, her hands resting calmly on her lap as the meeting begins.
Knight Passes bows deeply to the Empress, his hand placed firmly over his heart. Adelis is caught off guard by the sudden and unexpected timing of the knight's return. Rayhan and Adelis realize it hasn't even been a week since they last saw Passes. The saint sternly commands the knight to sit down immediately if he values his life.
Adelis feels uneasy as the saint suggests they discuss the contents of the revelation.
A small clink sounds as the saint asks if Passes is currently the Empress's escort. Rayhan explains the knight's training duties, but the saint insists he must remain an escort. The saint warns that Passes will play a decisive role if the Empress's life is endangered. A legendary group of warriors appears together during a brief shift in the narrative focus. Rayhan recalls the unsolved carriage attack, wondering if the threat is still at large. Rayhan asks about the specific danger, but the saint says she only knows Passes is needed.
A tight, straining sound escapes Rayhan as he clenches his fist in visible, mounting frustration.
The emperor glares, deeply annoyed that the revelation forces him to rely on Passes. Rayhan laments that he cannot protect Adelis himself and must keep the knight near.
Rayhan informs Adelis that Passes will resume his duties as her personal escort knight.
A soft rustle sounds as Knight Passes acknowledges his reappointment to the Empress's side. The knight blushes as he accepts the duty, clearly moved by the return to service. Passes declares that nothing else matters as long as he stays by the Empress's side. The imperial couple shares a silent moment of connection, their hands interlaced on the table. Adelis asks the knight to stop, telling him his bold declaration is far too much.
Rihan firmly reminds the knight that Adelis is the Empress and his own beloved spouse.
Rihan threatens to personally reject the knight if he speaks out of turn like that again.
Adelis politely ends the meeting, stating she will take her leave if there is nothing more. A sudden rustle sounds as the saint stands, desperately asking for just one more moment.
Rihan mentions he already has too little time to spend with his wife each day.
A peaceful expression settles on the Empress's face as she enjoys her husband's protective attention. Adelis offers a cheerful farewell, promising to see Rayhan again later in the day.
The atmosphere turns heavy as Rayhan remains behind with the saint and the knight.
Rayhan asks the saint what she urgently needed to say to him in private. The saint acknowledges her emotions are getting ahead of her as she fidgets nervously.
A sudden rustle sounds as Rayhan orders Passes to escort the saint back to her chambers.
The saint blushes while asking the emperor if he intends to take a second consort.
Rayhan addresses her coldly by her full name, shocking the saint with his formal tone.
The emperor clarifies that his gratitude for her revelation only goes so far and no further. A cold, sharp sound fills the room as Rayhan warns against any interference in his affairs. Rayhan glares intensely at the saint, sternly advising her it would be best not to. The grand palace interior features white pillars and ornate gold architectural details. Adelis stands alone in a spacious hall, dressed in a blue checkered gown. Adelis feels uneasy, questioning why Rayhan isn't the one destined to protect her. She reflects on how Passes ultimately failed to save the Empress in the original timeline.
Adelis recalls how Passes always took her side, yet his role remained largely insignificant.
She weighs the saint's words against the book, wondering which source of truth has changed.
A confident smile touches her lips as she concludes that the future is no longer fixed.
Adelis stops suddenly, feeling as though she can finally let down her guard and relax.
Despite her relief, she remains plagued by the feeling that she has forgotten something vital. She remembers the saint's insistence that keeping the knight as her escort is absolutely necessary. The Empress recalls the warning that Passes will be the one to save her life.
Adelis rushes through the hall, remembering her past fear that Rayhan would be her killer.
While she no longer fears her husband, the saint's warning of a new danger lingers. She wonders who could possibly be threatening her life if it is no longer Rayhan.
Her thoughts turn toward the recent carriage attack, questioning if the mastermind is still lurking.
She looks at the book's character pages, noticing a blank frame for a final person. Adelis searches through the library, realizing the identity of this mysterious person remains a complete mystery.
Her eyes narrow as she focuses on the lingering question of this unknown character's identity.
She suspects that the person missing from the record is the true threat to her safety.
A sudden knock-knock sounds as Rayhan calls out to her from outside the library.
Adelis quickly hides the book among the shelves and invites her husband to enter.
Rihan asks what she was doing, and she explains she was reading while questioning his return.
Rayhan explains his quick return, noting that night vermin passes will be arriving shortly. Turning away, Rayhan asks if she is truly comfortable with the knight's return to service.
Adilis reaches out and hugs her husband from behind, seeking to comfort him.
She offers to dismiss the knight if his presence makes Rayhan feel at all uncomfortable.
Rayhan looks down with a conflicted expression, admitting that he isn't actually fine with it. He explains that the threat to her life means they must keep the knight close.
Adilis watches her husband, noting the internal struggle he faces regarding her personal safety. Rayhan worries about the knight's potential behavior, while Adilis promises to reject any romantic advances.
She firmly declares her intention to set professional boundaries with passes from now on.
Rihan looked surprised, telling her that such a harsh measure won't be necessary.
Rayhan notes she is too kind for such cruelty, while she wonders if she was unclear. A fiery aura surrounds Rayhan as he promises to handle the situation personally and decisively.
A few minutes pass as the scene shifts to the Emperor's private office.
Adilis blushes deeply, calling out to her husband in a flustered and embarrassed tone.
Rayhan sits at his desk with Adilis on his lap, refusing her request for space. Standing before them, Night Passes looks on with a dark and deeply dejected expression. Adilis is mortified by the lack of professionalism, while the knight stands right there watching. The Empress wonders if this situation is truly okay as the silver-haired knight watches them. She becomes acutely aware of her husband's physical closeness, her face turning bright red. Surrounded by a floral atmosphere, she notes how closely she can feel his warm breath.
Rayhan claims he is comfortable working while holding her, despite her worries about his efficiency.
Rihan leans in and asks her to speak to him casually, just as they always do. Adilis glances nervously at the knight, who remains standing awkwardly in the middle of the room. Passes is stunned as Rayhan pulls Adilis closer, demanding she focus only on her husband. Rayhan tightens his grip on her waist, dismissing her protest that the timing is highly inappropriate. Adilis is shocked that Rayhan is treating Passes like an object while he continues their embrace.
Rayhan gazes intensely at his wife, reminding her that her husband is the only one present.
Rayhan nuzzles her neck, causing Adilis to giggle and protest that the sensation tickles her.
A soft blush colors the Empress's face as she peeks at her husband through her lashes. A heavy, somber atmosphere settles over the room during a moment of tense silence. The silver-haired knight stands with a deeply dejected and pained expression on his face.
Adilis' eyes widen in surprise as she notices the knight's visible distress and sorrow.
A strained silence lingers as Night Passes struggles to maintain his composure before the couple.
The knight remains still and quiet, seemingly lost in a wave of deep internal conflict.
Bowing respectfully, Night Passes requests to be excused as his current duty shift has ended.
A sharp tock sounds as the door closes, leaving the Emperor and Empress alone in the office.
Adilis watches the door, privately noting that the knight looked as though he were on the verge of tears.
Rayhan asks if the knight's persistent feelings for her are a source of discomfort. The blonde-haired woman looks away thoughtfully, processing the weight of the knight's unrequited affection. Adilis admits the intensity of the situation is quite a lot to handle at the moment. Rayhan playfully accuses her of thinking about another man while her husband is right in front of her. The Empress quickly tries to correct him, flustered by his sudden and teasing display of jealousy. Rihan claims his time is too precious to spend on anything other than thinking about his wife.
Adilis questions if it is truly responsible for an emperor to prioritize her over his imperial duties.
Rihan jokingly suggests leaving all state affairs to the ministers just to spend more time with her. A soft expression touches her face as she reflects on her husband's deep and focused devotion.
Rayhan complains about lazy nobles, leading Adilis to think he is acting quite childishly in this moment.
The Emperor promises to dedicate more time to her once the current political unrest finally settles down.
She laughs softly at his competitive and affectionate remarks, finding his behavior genuinely endearing.
The rhythmic sound of footsteps begins to echo as someone walks across the polished palace tiles.
A steady pace continues as the scene shifts away from the private office and toward the grand hall.
Night Passes walks away down the long, ornate hallway, his posture reflecting his dejection. A delicate dalgak sounds as a small spoon stirs a cup of tea in a quiet chamber. The saint sits alone, reflecting on the cold and formal distance Rayhan maintained during their meeting.
Rihan's earlier warning against any interference in imperial affairs hangs heavily in the air.
The saint grits her teeth in visible frustration, clearly bothered by the Emperor's firm rejection. An attendant enters and asks the saint if she has successfully located the object of her search. The saint orders her to keep looking, insisting the item must be hidden somewhere within the empire. She laments that the Pope is calling for her return, fearing her trip will have been pointless. A determined look crosses her face as she plots a way to force Rayhan to seek her out. Bright sunlight illuminates a palace corridor decorated with red and gold imperial banners. Standing between her guards, the saint formally announces her intention to return to the Sacred Empire. Rayhan offers a polite farewell and wishes her safe travels, visibly relieved to see her leaving.
The saint mentions she couldn't find the future-predicting book in the library, catching the couple off guard.
She asks Adelis to let her know if the book is found, as she wishes to study it.
Adelis remains silent about her own knowledge, questioning what would happen if she showed the saint the book.
The mysterious book sits open and blank, its hidden truths currently safe from the saint's curiosity.
Adelis agrees to notify her if it appears, despite her internal decision that the saint cannot be trusted.
The Empress resolves not to take any unnecessary risks regarding the dangerous information contained in the book.
The saint and her entourage begin their long walk out of the Grand Imperial Palace.
Adelis waves a cheerful goodbye, silently hoping that they never have to see each other again.
Rayhan notices his wife is in an unusually good mood, and she credits it to the saint's departure.
Rayhan suggests returning to the bedroom, but Adelis insists she wants to go to the study.
He slyly proposes bringing books to bed instead, making Adelis think he is becoming quite fox-like.
Adela spots someone leaving in the distance and asks her husband who the individual might be.
A man in an ornate blue and gold uniform acknowledges her as he prepares to depart.
Rayhan identifies the man as Johannes Fratze, the current commander of the Imperial Knights.
Adelis recognizes the name immediately, noting that the Fratze family is part of the high ducal nobility.
Rayhan explains that the knight is a minor duke who must soon return to inherit his family title. Johannes Fratze is described as the #1 marriage candidate among noble ladies since Rayhan has no consort.
Adelis observes the regretful expression on the minor duke's face as he lingers near the saint.
She notes that the knight commander is closely related to the characters recorded in her mysterious book.
Adelis wonders if the black-haired man might be the person missing from the book's character records.
She examines the portraits in the book, focusing on the single empty frame that remains unidentified.
A thought bubble asks if the final character is meant to fill the blank space in the record. Johannes tells the saint that they will meet again soon as she prepares to leave with her guards.
Adelis cautions herself that she should not jump to any conclusions regarding the knight's true identity.
She thinks to herself that the commander is too handsome to just pass by without any notice. Adelis acknowledges his looks, but thinks that he is not nearly as handsome as her husband, Rayhan. She notes that while the commander is striking, he still does not compare to Rayhan's appearance.
Johannes stands alone in the bright palace corridor as a carriage waits in the far distance.
The commander formally greets the Empress, identifying himself as Johannes Fratze, and she politely welcomes him.
Johannes apologizes for his late greeting, mentioning he's wanted to meet her but was stopped by someone.
Johannes cheekily suggests there aren't many reasons for the delay, while Rayhan looks on with an annoyed expression.
Johannes notes Rayhan's awkwardness with women is understandable, while a sharp grind sounds as Rayhan calls his name.
Johannes reflects on Rayhan's pure heart, while Adelis comments on how close the two men seem.
Johannes claims they endured the war together, but Rayhan immediately retorts that they aren't that close.
Johannes insists he's known Rayhan for years, leading Adelis to note their bond is obvious to anyone.
Rayhan maintains they aren't close, prompting Johannes to act hurt, while Adelis wonders if he's the missing character.
The scene shifts to a palace interior as Johannes mentions hearing the Empress and Emperor were separated. Adelis confirms they spent 7 years apart without letters, while Rayhan explains he was preparing for rebellion. Johannes leans in and whispers to Adelis about a version of Rayhan that she does not know.
Rayhan insists on telling her the stories himself to prevent Johannes from sharing his embarrassing past.
Rayhan grabs Johannes by the collar, causing the commander to jokingly flee because he's afraid of his majesty.
Adelis waves goodbye and laughs at their interaction, noting that Rayhan and Sir Fratze are very close.
A thought bubble reveals that Rayhan once rescued a kidnapped noble child who was the minor duke.
Adelis turns to her husband and asks him for more details about how he rescued the child.
A flashback shows Rayhan rescuing the bound child, and Adelis understands how the two became close friends. Adelis asks Rayhan what he was like back then, and he looks at her with a surprised expression.
Rayhan asks if she is truly curious, and Adelis enthusiastically confirms that she wants to know everything.
Rayhan smiles and warns her that his past is full of stories that are drenched in blood.
Rayhan begins his story by recalling a girl he once saw in the Eastern Stein territory.
A flashback shows a young Rayhan watching a blonde girl from a distance and wanting to talk. Rayhan kisses Adelis' hand and tells her that seeing the real her now is better than he imagined.
Adelis blushes deeply, her eyes wide as she looks at her husband with a shocked expression.
Rayhan gazes at her with a soft expression and begins to speak more about his feelings. Rayhan continues his heartfelt confession, telling her that being with her now is a much better experience.
Rayhan admits that being with her is better than the lonely days spent missing her, leaving Adelis flustered.
Rayhan calls his wife's name and she responds, leading him to softly ask her for permission to kiss. Adilis tells her husband he can kiss her as much as he wants as they move closer together.
The scene shifts to the exterior of the Grand Palace Towers under a bright and clear sky.
A quick click sounds as the door to a room in the palace is pushed open.
Adilis enters the study alone and is startled when the book suddenly lights up with a golden glow. She realizes the timing is perfect since Rayhan has gone to a meeting with the imperial ministers.
Adilis reaches for the glowing book on the library shelf while Sir Farron stands guard in the background. Sir Farron looks confused as Adilis stops what she is doing to speak to him.
Adilis tells Sir Farron she is going to meditate and requests that she not be disturbed for a while. Holding the book, Adilis resolutely declares that she will change whatever fate has been laid out for her.
Inside an ornate room with red curtains, a voice notes the Empire is indebted.
Rayhan thanks the saint, but she insists helping those in need is her duty. Rayhan acknowledges the Sacred Empire's crucial aid while Adilis watches with the mysterious book.
Adilis is horrified to learn that a third of the Empire's people died during the incident.
Rayhan offers his support, acknowledging the severe manpower shortage as the plague continues spreading.
A soft touch accompanies the saint's request for continued help, which the emperor immediately grants.
The saint smiles warmly, her hands clasped in Rayhan's as they discuss helping the Empire.
Despite her recent exhaustion, the saint insists on working to prevent more patients from suffering.
Rayhan gazes at her and offers his sincere thanks for her selfless dedication.
The emperor humbly remarks that he is only fulfilling the responsibilities expected of his position.
Adilis turns a page in the book, realizing the information presented makes no logical sense. A chilling blue light envelops Adilis as she sees Rayhan smiling at the saint.
A realization strikes her as she watches the intimate interaction unfold between her husband and another. The text ominously declares this as the moment Rayhan truly began falling for the saint.
A central illustration depicts the blossoming feelings between the story's protagonists as they stand together.
Adilis weeps in the vision, devastated by Rayhan's broken promise to only have eyes for her. A soft sob escapes her lips as she hunches over in the quiet, lonely room. Steeling herself, the future Adilis decides that crying is a luxury she cannot currently afford.
She begins writing frantically, determined to record every detail to prevent the impending mass death.
A sudden, loud bang sounds as the door is flung open and a woman shouts.
Adilis looks back in shock, processing that she is witnessing a version of her future self.
The blonde empress frowns, wondering why the book is still projecting these strange, vivid scenes.
She questions why the vision continues even after the supposed future has already been revealed. In the vision, Rayhan coldly tells Adilis that the saint's assistance is none of her concern.
Adilis questions why the emperor would prioritize the saint over the expertise of his own ministers.
Rayhan's looming presence intimidates Adilis as he mentions a minister who recently perished from the plague.
Rayhan accuses her of incompetence, claiming she hoarded palace physicians while a plague-stricken count suffered.
Adilis stammers an apology, but Rayhan cynically notes her father's safety came at a terrible cost.
He reveals that hundreds of thousands died so that her father could be the one saved.
The vision ends with a rhythmic patter of running footsteps as the empress flees the room.
Returning to the present, Adilis sits at her desk, gasping at the horrific fate she saw.
The book contrasts the saint's heroism during the crisis with the empress's disastrous failures. Adilis finally understands the catalyst for Rayhan's deep-seated resentment toward his wife in that timeline. Her hand brushes against the page as she searches for a glimmer of hope or truth.
She notes an odd detail regarding the timeline of Rayhan's developing feelings for the saint.
Looking at Rayhan's portrait, she doubts the man she knows would ever truly abandon her.
Adilis reflects on their bond, feeling certain that Rayhan's loyalty to her would not break easily.
A golden radiance emanates from the center of the page as the content begins to shift. She spots a discrepancy. The book refers to her father as a count, not a marquise.
She previously believed Rayhan's hatred was caused by her jealousy and evil acts against the saint.
A new theory forms as she considers that the book might not show a fixed future.
A sudden flash sounds as the book glows, suggesting it displays only one of many possibilities.
A soft rustle sounds as she turns to the next page, eager to see what remains.
A character profile appears for Johannes Fratza, the second son who inherited his brother's dukedom.
Adilis is stunned, having assumed the man close to Rayhan wouldn't be part of the record.
She wonders if this man is her destined killer, though she tells herself it's just speculation.
A delicate paper rustle sounds as she turns the page, noticing even more hidden text.
The book reveals that Johannes Fratza was the one who actually fell for the saint.
Upon learning the saint loved the emperor, the duke chose to selflessly support her heart's desire.
Adilis realizes Johannes is the classic sub-male lead, trapped in the tragedy of unrequited love.
A quick thud sounds as Adilis places her hand on a thick book. Holding a document and the book, Adilis resolves to do what she can. The title screen presents the series information for the reader.
A servant welcomes the Empress to the grand and sunlit Imperial Library.
The librarian asks the Empress what specific book she is looking for.
Adilas requests recommendations for books specifically regarding acquired infectious diseases.
The librarian leads the way as Adilas notes she must first gather information.
A soft thud sounds as Adilas reaches for knowledge to back her claims.
Adilas stands confidently beside a massive stock of books she intends to read. The Empress collapses onto the desk, feeling completely and utterly defeated by the material. She laments that she cannot understand a single thing regarding the medical terminology.
Adilas tosses a book in frustration, wondering who would even read such difficult content. Adilas notices something unexpected in the records and reacts with wide-eyed surprise.
She discovers the name Eliana Fratze and wonders if she belongs to the Duke's family.
Flipping through pages, she realizes the borrower's choices were all related to diseases. A vision of a young girl with long black hair appears in her mind.
Adilas calls out to Sir Farron, who immediately responds to her summons.
Adilas instructs the knight to bring the knight commander, Johannes Fratze, to her.
A panel shows a door in the palace being opened.
Adilas waits at a table when she realizes someone has arrived to see her.
The Empress is startled to see her husband has accompanied the knight commander.
Rihan explains the meeting ended early, so they came together after hearing her summons.
Johannes cheekily admits to being caught when Rehan asks if he ended it early.
Johannes notes to himself that calling the Emperor by a pet name is unusual. Johannes asks if he can use the nickname, but Rehan rejects him immediately.
Johannes realizes it is not the right time for jokes and shifts his tone.
Johannes stops in his tracks when he hears the name of Eliana Fratze mentioned.
Johannes confirms she is his sister and asks the purpose of the meeting. Adilas explains she wants to discuss books with Eliana despite her young age. Adilas notes that Eliana's name was always present in the library's borrowing records.
Johannes asks if the books his sister borrowed were related to medical topics. Rayon looks thoughtful as the Empress confirms the books were specifically about diseases. With a quick motion of his hand, Rayon dismisses the servants from the room.
Rihan tells them to speak freely, and Johannes agrees to reveal the truth. A flashback shows young Eliana preferring heavy books in her room over tea parties.
Johannes reveals Eliana reads about germs and poisons, horrifying the blonde Empress.
A flashback depicts the young child surrounded by a mountain of books.
Johannes emphasizes that specifically, his sister only chooses books with very heavy content.
Adilas is shocked to learn about the young girl's morbid and advanced reading habits.
Johannes reassures the Empress that Eliana does not read them with bad intentions.
Johannes explains his sister is just timid and hopes she won't be a burden.
Adilas hands over a sealed letter and asks Johannes to give it to her.
Johannes happily agrees to deliver the letter to his sister after he finishes work.
Rihan intervenes and commands Johannes to deliver the letter immediately instead of waiting.
Rehan insists on the immediate delivery or for the commander to return to barracks.
Johannes takes his leave while Adilas tells him she is counting on him. Rehan gazes affectionately at his wife as the knight commander walks away. Johannes wonders if the Emperor is actually feeling jealous of his interaction with Adilas.
Johannes dismisses the thought, smiling as he assumes there is no way Rehan is jealous.
The scene shifts to the exterior of the Grand Palace under a bright sky. Eliana Fratze nervously introduces herself to the Empress while looking shy and bashful. Adilas welcomes the girl, internally noting that Eliana appears more ordinary than expected.
Eliana bows deeply, stuttering that it is a great honor to meet the Empress.
A soft huff sounds as Adilas prepares to address the timid young girl.
A flashback shows Johannes warning Eliana not to cause any trouble during her visit.
Eliana remembers her brother's stern caution against mentioning her controversial interest in books.
Adilas invites Eliana to sit, thanking her for accepting the invitation to the palace.
Adilas mentions her interest in infectious diseases, causing Eliana to flinch in total surprise.
Johannes appears and encourages his younger sister to speak honestly with the Empress.
Eliana reacts with wide-eyed shock upon seeing her brother serving as the Empress's escort.
Johannes confirms that he agreed to act as the Empress's personal escort for today. Adilas explains she brought Johannes along specifically to help Eliana feel less nervous.
A soft thud sounds as Eliana reflects on the Empress's deep kindness and consideration.
Adilas and Johannes urge the young girl to share her insights without any hesitation. Eliana begins clarifying the difficult passage in the book, explaining its meaning to Adilas. The girl continues her explanation, detailing the mechanisms behind how specific diseases spread.
Adilas and Eliana discuss the possibility of diseases being transmitted between people and animals.
Johannes is amazed to see his normally quiet sister speaking so extensively and confidently.
Eliana excitedly shares her knowledge about how corpses and undertakers also spread disease.
Johannes smiles as he watches his sister finally find joy in sharing her expertise.
The two women share a bright, happy moment while bonding over their fascinating conversation.
Beside a carriage, Eliana wonders if her contribution was truly helpful to the blonde Empress.
Adilas and Eliana grasp hands, both delighted by their meeting and their bond. A soft patter sounds as Eliana waves goodbye, promising to return the following day.
Adilis feels confident that Eliana's knowledge will help her prepare for the coming crisis.
Johannes approaches and thanks the Empress for spending so much time with Eliana.
Both characters express their gratitude, finding the meeting to be extremely beneficial and fulfilling.
Johannes admits that Juliana's unique interests have left her without any close social connections.
A flashback shows Eliana being shunned by other noblewomen because of her unusual hobbies.
Adelis and Johannes continue their conversation as they walk through the Grand Palace Hall.
The blonde empress gestures to herself, confidently stating her desire to be Aliana's friend.
Johannes is surprised by the Empress's genuine affection for his talented younger sister.
Johannes kneels before the Empress, swearing his loyalty to her as a sibling would.
Johannes remains in a deep kneel to show his immense respect for the Empress.
A soft thud sounds as Johannes acknowledges the Empress's kindness in befriending his sister.
A vision of Eliana and Adilis smiling together represents their new and heartwarming bond.
Adelis mentions she is grateful, though she finds the formal kneeling gesture quite overwhelming.
Johannes remains kneeling as he mentions a previous attack the Empress suffered in the past.
Adelis recalls that the culprit hasn't been found, noting Sir Fratza isn't a suspect.
The Empress resolves that now is not the time to be overly picky about allies.
Adilis tells Johannes she is counting on him as he takes her hand respectfully.
Johannes asks if he may share a personal story with the Empress before working.
Adilis agrees, prompting Johannes to begin a tale about his first meeting with Kieran.
A flashback shows a stoic, red-haired boy staring at a young, tied-up Johannes crying.
A quick tap sounds as the scene shifts to a foot stepping onto pavement.
Johannes recounts his past habit of skipping lessons to roam the city in disguise. A promotional banner provides information regarding commissions and recruitment for various scanlation groups.
Johannes explains that wearing commoner's clothing allowed him to wander around the city freely.
Adilis reacts with surprise upon learning about Johannes's unusual childhood and his commoner friends. Johannes admits his downfall was being too young and trusting people far too carelessly.
Johannes explains that the people hired to kidnap him were his own regular acquaintances.
The blonde Empress reacts with a shocked exclamation to the news of his betrayal. A flashback shows Johannes bound on a ship, realizing he has been completely abducted. Johannes reveals his commoner friends found him, prompting Adelis to ask if they rescued him.
Johannes describes the friends mocking his nobility, leaving the Empress horrified by their cold betrayal.
A quick, mechanical click sounds as Johannes recalls thinking he was facing certain death.
The scene shifts as the knight mentions a turning point in his dire situation.
The door creaks open to reveal a dangerous young swordsman with fiery red hair.
The red-haired boy identifies Johannes and mentions that his father is searching for him.
Johannes is desperate for rescue, assuming his father will pay any requested ransom immediately.
In a chibi flashback, the young Kieran claims he has no need for any money. Kieran reveals he is the Grand Duke's heir, though Johannes finds his commoner clothes suspicious.
Kieran smirks, explaining he is not foolish enough to show his noble status while wandering.
Dark shadows fall across the floor as Kieran demands Johannes's future in exchange for life.
A quick swoosh sounds as Kieran offers a choice between cooperation or immediate death.
Johannes requests a more reasonable choice, but the red-haired boy insists he already gave one. Johannes weighs his options, knowing cooperation means opposing the Emperor or dying like a dog.
The two young boys firmly shake hands, sealing their dangerous and life-changing new alliance.
Johannes agrees to cooperate upon his safe return, and Kieran accepts the deal with satisfaction.
Chibi panels show Kieran defeating kidnappers easily while Adelis asks if Rehan rescued him formally.
Johannes clarifies that the rescue did not happen the way Adilis had initially assumed.
A flashback title marks the events from 5 years ago, shortly after the kidnapping incident.
Younger Kieran orders his butler to mobilize intelligence units and find the missing Fratza heir.
Kieran admits he wants to rescue the heir so the Duke's family will be indebted.
Johannes questions if placing the family in debt was truly the only motive for rescue.
Kieran coldly states he would rescue a living friend, otherwise leaving the dead to fate.
Back in the present, the Knight Commander finishes recounting the red-haired man's chilling words.
Adelis is impressed by Rehan's resolute side, making Johannes worry he said too much.
Johannes quickly tries to clarify that Rehan was actually thinking of him during the rescue.
A soft rustle sounds as flower petals drift, signaling a change in the romantic atmosphere. The Empress blushes as she thinks fondly of her husband's intense and protective nature.
Johannes looks slightly uncomfortable and agrees with the Empress's assessment of his master.
Adelis asks to hear about Kieran's life before the duchy, and Johannes happily agrees.
In a chibi scene, Johannes acknowledges Rehan's past in the fighting pits before Adelis's intervention.
Adilis describes Rehan as a wary baby kitten when they first met in the palace. The Empress explains that kittens become devoted once they open their hearts, much like her husband.
A fierce growl sounds as Johannes imagines a massive tiger representing Rehan's true, terrifying nature.
Rehan suddenly appears in the doorway, asking what the two are discussing so very cheerfully.
A soft mumble sounds as Chibi Johannes notes the kitten has arrived, causing Adelis to panic.
A quick swoosh sounds as Johannes makes a hasty exit to avoid Rayhan's suspicious gaze.
Rayhan asks if the conversation was interesting, and Adelis stammers as she hides the topic.
Rihan doubts that Johannes said anything positive, but Adelis insists the story was quite cool.
A sudden stop sounds as Rayhan pauses, surprised by the sudden compliment from his wife.
Rayhan questions if he is truly cool, reminding her of when she said the exact opposite.
Rihan smiles, stating he is fine as long as she has changed her mind now.
The red-haired emperor gazes intensely at his wife with a look of deep, focused affection.
Rihan warns Adelis not to become too friendly with the Knight Commander in the future.
A sudden grab sounds as Rayhan takes her hand while she asks about Johannes's hidden side. Rayhan leans in closely and admits with a blush that he is simply feeling jealous.
Rayhan asks if his jealousy is enough of a reason as they sit alone together.
Rayhan and Adelis share private thoughts regarding his protective jealousy and her need for a favor.
Count Reynold, a medical department professor, reacts with shock while reviewing a set of academic papers. In a grand study, the professor marvels at Lady Fratz's advanced medical expertise despite her lack of formal training.
Adelis praises Ileana's exceptional talent while the professor admits his disbelief at the young girl's skill. The blonde empress focuses on a stack of books as she prepares to ask a serious question.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp tack sounding as Adelis slams her hand onto a book. Adelis solemnly asks the medical experts about the consequences of a contagious disease outbreak in the city. The Empress presses for details on a scenario where 10% of the capital's population is infected.
Reynold warns that such a disaster would be catastrophic and should never be allowed to happen.
Adelis listens intently as the professor predicts the disease would likely consume the entire empire.
The gray-haired professor explains that transmission rates and fatality are the key factors deciding a contagion's path.
A distant tombstone illustrates Reynolds' point about deadly diseases with low transmission rates staying localized and contained.
He clarifies that fast-spreading diseases with low fatalities are often dismissed as simple common colds.
Reynold concludes that if both transmission and fatality are high, at least 20% of citizens would perish.
Eliana asks if temple healing could help, but Reynold remains doubtful about stopping such a rapid spread.
Adelis looks deeply concerned while considering potential ways to prevent such a mass tragedy from occurring. The Empress asks if there is no way to prevent it, receiving only somber silence from her advisors. Adelis dismisses their concerns as hypothetical curiosity after Reynold admits he's never heard of such a severe disease. The blonde Empress reflects on her true motive for seeking a professional medical opinion on the matter. Adelis pauses in the Grand Palace Hall, looking troubled by the professional assessment she just received. Chibi Reynolds suggests expanding medical personnel while Adelis ponders the Empire's desperate need for more doctors. A foreboding text warns of an impending crisis as the scene shifts to the Emperor and Empress. Rayhan enters the room and Adelis greets him with a relieved and bright expression.
The red-haired emperor offers his constant support after Adelis confirms the professor was extremely helpful.
Chibi panels show the couple agreeing that the current medical academy faculty is far too small. Rayhan suggests founding a training institute to address the physician shortage, making Adelis feel hopeful.
Adelis is dismayed to learn that establishing such an institute would take over a year and a half.
The Empress realizes she must find a faster way to prepare for the coming epidemic crisis.
The scene transitions as Adelis worries about her inability to move the date of future events forward. Adelis asks Rayhan about the specific amount of personal treasury funds she is allowed to access.
The red-haired emperor gently takes her hands while offering his full and unconditional financial support.
Rayhan hands her a document confirming that he has provided a substantial amount for her needs.
Adelis reacts with comical, wide-eyed shock at the staggering number of zeros on the treasury check.
Rihan encourages her to speak up if the amount is insufficient while she remains stunned by his wealth.
Overwhelmed with gratitude, the blonde Empress tackles her husband in a sudden and happy hug.
A soft mumble sounds as Rayhan embraces her back, blushing at her sudden display of affection.
While Rayhan promises to spare no expense, Adelis focuses on her next step with the funds secured.
A carriage travels through the city as a narrative text lists the essentials for moving people. A sudden screech sounds as the carriage wheel comes to a stop during the city travel. A firm top sounds as the Empress steps out, seeking a cause to justify her next actions.
Disguised in a commoner's cloak, Adelis resolves to use the slums as her justification for change.
Sir Farron questions the visit to the slums, while Adelis explains the area's high risk for epidemics. Farron notes her beauty draws attention even in common clothes, but Adelis promises to stay close.
Chibi Adelis expresses confidence in Farron's protection, while the pink-haired knight remains skeptical of her plan.
Farron scans their surroundings, acknowledging his sharp eyes but insisting on extreme caution for her safety.
The knight suggests dropping formal honorifics, while Adelis proposes they address each other by their names.
Farron immediately rejects using her name, fearing the Emperor's legendary jealousy would result in his death.
The pink-haired knight keeps a watchful and sharp profile as they move through the city streets.
A quick swoosh sounds as Farron pulls the Empress closer while warning her to stay alert.
From the shadows, ragged slum residents watch the mysterious outsiders arrive in their neighborhood.
A sudden, low rumble sounding as the Empress is swarmed by desperate beggars.
Adelis is heartbroken observing countless starving children in the dire slums.
A sudden, quick grab sounding as Adelis flinches in surprise.
A sharp tap sounding as the pink-haired knight forcefully knocks away a persistent beggar. A soft grunt sounding as the pair hurries through the narrow, crowded streets.
A weary exhale sounding as they reach a quiet and dilapidated building.
Farron notes that nobles rarely witness the harsh and miserable reality of slum life. Adelis stops before a small, neglected shop nestled in the heart of the district.
A high-pitched creak sounding as the Empress enters the slum's only apothecary. Farron asks for cold medicine from a skeptical man standing behind the counter.
A sharp hum sounding as the apothecary bluntly orders the outsiders to leave.
A sudden, firm tap sounding as Adelis places a silver coin on the counter.
A soft gasp sounding as the shopkeeper questions their interest in seeing his medicine.
Farron clarifies they only wish to inspect the medicine and not punish anyone.
The shopkeeper reluctantly tells them to wait while Adelis feels safer with Farron. A quick rattle sounding as the man produces a small jar of medicine. Adelis is horrified to find that the pills within the jar are clearly moldy.
The Empress realizes this poor medicine will never stop a coming mass tragedy.
Adelis prepares to address the shopkeeper after seeing the state of the shop.
Adelis asks the apothecary if he would be open to hearing a proposal. A title card marks the transition into the next phase of the Empress's plan.
A sudden, cold shiver sounding as Adelis offers a serious and life-changing deal. The shopkeeper explains that high-quality herbs are simply unaffordable for most of his patients. A sharp snap sounding as Adelis suggests selling the medicine at a very low price. The shopkeeper remains cynical about the possibility of people getting such affordable help. He explains that in 30 years of work, he has seen no miracles happen. A heavy silence falls as he notes no one truly cares for the slums. Farron questions why the man remains in the slums if things are so hopeless. The shopkeeper admits he cannot abandon the people who have no one else.
He declares that as a native, he has a duty to look after them.
Adelis admires the man's selflessness and deep devotion to the poor residents.
She acknowledges his expertise and willingness to work in this difficult and neglected environment.
The blonde Empress decides this honest man is perfect for her mission.
Adelis asks to entrust a new and important mission to the dedicated shopkeeper. A sharp gasp sounding as the man hears her plan for a new pharmacy.
Adelis asks if he is willing to lead the new establishment in the slums.
A firm squeeze sounding as the man realizes a miracle might actually be happening.
The shopkeeper agrees to the Empress's proposal without any further hesitation.
Adelis promises to discuss details later, leaving the man confused by her pure motives. Farron warns of the financial loss while Adelis prioritizes the people's welfare.
A soft sigh sounding as Adelis feels satisfied with this important first step.
A loud shout sounding as someone suddenly points at the disguised and mysterious pair. A low rumble sounding as several armed men suddenly surround the two outsiders. A man calls out to them from behind as they are cornered.
A sudden, sharp chill sounding as a masked vigilante captain confronts them.
A soft scoff sounding as the masked man rejects Farron's calm down.
A metallic click sounding as both men reach for their weapons.
A sharp ring sounding as the pink-haired knight draws his sword.
The masked leader orders his men to attack the lone knight.
A loud roar sounding as the thugs charge and Adelis flinches. Masked vigilantes look up in shock as a loud "Stop!" echoes from the rooftop. A sudden, quick whoosh sounding as a figure dives from the roof toward the alley. A sudden, sharp clack sounding as a mysterious traveler lands firmly on the ground. Adelis looks on in shock as a hooded warrior with a sword protects her from the thugs. The cloaked man asks if she is all right, and Adelis confirms she is relatively unharmed. The purple-haired man reveals himself as Raiden, the Empress's third escort knight, while expressing relief. Farron notes Raiden is late while the silver-haired Passes defends his timing during the confrontation. A sudden, firm grip sounding as the vigilante leader refuses to back down during the standoff. A bandaged fist clenches as the slum's vigilantes declare they will never retreat from a fight.
The brown-haired leader orders an attack while the apothecary shopkeeper desperately shouts for them to wait.
A confused gasp sounding as the shopkeeper interrupts the captain to check on his well-being. The captain claims troublemakers barged into the shop while the nightly escorts protect the blonde Empress. The shopkeeper explains the group intends to build a new apothecary and provide quality herbs. The leader is confused by reports of a sword attack as a local commoner flinches nearby. The blonde commoner admits he was hit, but only by a harmless sword chief. Chibi Farron explains that he had no choice since the man wouldn't let go of him. The leader scoffs as the commoner admits their targets didn't even have a spare coin. The vigilantes beat the commoner for the misunderstanding while the knights observe the chaotic scene.
The brown-haired captain offers a sincere apology to the blonde girl for the sudden fright.
Adilis smiles warmly, claiming it was her fault for not explaining her presence more clearly.
The captain notes that without the vigilantes' protection, the slums would only suffer more hardship.
A soft thud sounding as the captain bows, asking to be spared from the Imperial Guards.
The blonde girl kindly promises she won't hand them over to any official authorities.
Adilis sets a condition that the vigilantes must protect her future herb shipments for the city.
A hearty laugh sounding as the captain agrees to help for the sake of the slums.
Adilis offers a radiant and thankful smile that illuminates the dark and dreary slum district.
A sudden warm flush sounding as the captain blushes deeply behind his dark face mask.
The captain asks if she will visit again while Adilis promises to count on his future help.
The knights think the captain is a fool while he waves a cheerful goodbye to them. A narrative bubble confirms the captain has fallen completely for the disguised empress of the empire.
Adilis smiles brightly as she prepares to take the next step in her medical plan.
The scene transitions to the Grand Palace as the evening sun bathes the capital in gold.
Marquise Torin, the Empire's Minister of Finance, listens with a serious and professional expression.
Adilis explains her plan to build a hospital, starting with an apothecary for basic medical supplies.
The Marquis worries that the poor will still be unable to afford even the simplest medicines.
A soft clink sounding as Adilis proposes selling medicine at a low cost or even for free.
The Marquis is shocked and asks if the Empress intends to personally fund the entire project.
Adilis smiles confidently while confirming the funds will come directly from her personal imperial treasury.
Marquise Torin asks for clarification on whether she truly intends to cover such a massive cost.
Adilis notes that skipping one expensive dress can provide medicine for hundreds of suffering people.
A soft click sounding as the Marquis admits the plan is feasible using her personal funds.
Adilis clarifies that the slum vigilantes have already agreed to provide security for their herb shipments.
The Marquise is stunned, asking when she recruited them and if she visited the slums herself.
Chibi Adilis flinches in surprise as her secret slum visit is nearly exposed by the minister. The Marquise shouts in panic while Adilis calmly sips tea, hoping she wasn't actually caught.
The minister warns that any harm to her would result in the slums being razed instantly.
Adilis asks to keep the visit secret while the Marquis marvels at her hidden selfless character. A narrative text box confirms that the new slum pharmacy was built smoothly and without issue.
Emperor Rayhan supported the treasury use while vigilantes safely transported the necessary herbs through the city.
A final text panel declares that helping the needy is a noble's ultimate and most important duty.
Adilis is visibly distressed as she realizes they cannot sell the herb shipments yet. A sudden quick rattle sounding as the masked captain explains the old apothecary is bedridden. Adilis feels frustrated after hearing the shopkeeper refuse to use herbs that weren't his. The Empress decides to check on the sick shopkeeper herself to help him recover.
A sudden quick rattle sounding as the escort knights watch Adilis prepare the medicine.
Adilis carefully mixes ingredients, glad her past herbology studies are proving useful in this crisis.
She hands a pouch to Farron and instructs him to deliver it to the shopkeeper.
The silver-haired Passus asks the Empress what her next move will be for the shop.
The masked captain questions how they can operate the pharmacy without a qualified professional present. Adilis points to herself, surprising the captain by suggesting she will act as the pharmacist.
The captain notes her knowledge, but Adilis admits she only knows the basics of healing.
Passus worries about the risks and suggests they should return to the palace and postpone.
A sudden firm squeeze sounding as the silver-haired knight pauses and reconsiders his own words. Passus thinks about the many people who are suffering and need help right this moment.
Adilis turns to Passus with a hopeful smile and asks if he would assist her. A sudden firm squeeze sounding as Passus laments that she won't use his real name.
He continues his quiet introspection, feeling conflicted about their current situation and his hidden identity. Farron returns with good news that the shopkeeper took the medicine and feels slightly better.
The masked man explains he will help sell the herbs until the shopkeeper fully recovers. Chibi Farron finds the plan exciting while Adilis is relieved to have his enthusiastic support.
Adilis prepares to open the doors while the masked captain offers his physical assistance.
Passus stands back in silence, watching the interaction with a serious and brooding expression. A sudden, sharp tap sounding as Farron reminds Passus they cannot stop the Empress's will.
Passus argues they must intervene if she is wrong, but Farron sees no issue here.
The group prepares the counter for their first customers as they prepare to open. Passus declares he will open the door to let the waiting residents into the shop. A sudden, soft chime sounding as a nervous father peeks into the newly opened apothecary.
A sudden, bright flash sounding as the group gives the man a warm and radiant welcome.
The man explains his young child has a fever that will not break for days.
Adilis listens with a gentle expression as she begins preparing a remedy for the child.
A sudden, soft, bubbly sounding as Passus ensures the man washes his hands before receiving medicine.
Adilis hands over the medicine and explains that the child should take it after meals. The man tentatively asks about the price, fearing he won't be able to afford it.
Adilis asks for just 1 copper coin and tells him to encourage others to wash.
The father is overcome with emotion and begins to weep while thanking the kind girl.
He explains his previous child died from illness and he couldn't bear to lose another.
Adelis feels a deep sadness that such simple medicine was once out of their reach.
A sudden, high-pitched creak sounding as more desperate people arrive and beg for medical help.
A sudden, firm squeeze sounding as Adelis calmly tells the crowd to wash their hands first.
She raises her voice cheerfully to tell everyone to form an orderly line for service.
The Empress repeats her hygiene instructions to ensure everyone understands the new rules of the shop.
The old apothecary shopkeeper finally arrives, offering a sincere apology for his late appearance.
Chibi Adelis asks if he is well, and he credits her effective medicine for his recovery. The shopkeeper takes over the counter, directing the customers to come forward for their supplies.
The masked captain asks Adelis about her relationship with the two men who are escorting her.
Adelis lies and claims that Farron is her older brother and Passus is her younger brother.
The captain notes that she luckily doesn't share many physical traits with the silver-haired brother.
Adelis laughs it off while the captain asks if she intends to visit the district again.
She mentions she will check on the shop, and her escorts listen to the conversation closely.
Farron and Passus both declare they will be the ones to report the shop's gas. The masked captain vows to protect the blonde girl and monitor her herb supplies during their ongoing conversation. The captain blushes deeply while offering to build her a home and take care of her every need.
A fragrant atmosphere settles over the scene as delicate pink and white flowers bloom in the background.
The captain gazes at the blonde girl with a hopeful expression and asks if she will stay there.
A sudden, sharp rejection interrupts the moment as Adelis gasps in shock upon realizing Emperor Rayhan has arrived.
Rayhan looms with an intensely angry expression and demands to know why she is emerging from the building.